Dylan Sloan had taken this meeting seriously, preparing meticulously before he left. But now that he was here, a sense of calm washed over him. Nerves wouldn't help, and besides, he'd been through this kind of thing before. Of course, his own grandfather hadn't been in the same league as General Ingram. Not even close. His family didn't move in these circles. Still, if Dylan dug deep and recalled the lessons his family had tried to instill in him, he wasn't a total lost cause. His elders had offered plenty of useful advice. It was just that he'd been too restless back then to listen. An aide led him through the estate. The security was palpable, but Dylan maintained his usual posture. That was his trademark. Whether he was surrounded by ordinary people or titans of industry, he was always nonchalantly himself. It wasn't an act. That effortless vibe was just who he was. Better that, he figured, than being a suck-up who was arrogant to those below and obsequious to those above. He was asked to wait for a moment outside General Ingram's room. It wasn't a power play. The general was in a state where he rarely saw visitors. They had to check on his condition before letting anyone in. Such was the reality of illness. A moment later, Liam Ingram, the so-called little tyrant, appeared. His father, Secretary Ingram, was still at work. Dylan waited just a minute before the door opened, and Liam himself came out to greet him. At home, the little tyrant was anything but. He was the model grandson, impossibly handsome and radiating a vibrant, disciplined energy that reminded Dylan of Leo. Leo could wake up at the crack of dawn, work out, study, and still be buzzing with energy in the afternoon, like he could conquer a dozen tasks in a single day. Dylan, on the other hand, felt like just one task, sometimes just the act of getting out of bed, was enough to drain him. Liam's eyes scanned Dylan's outfit, and he let out a stifled laugh. The guy was a walking contradiction. He had on a ridiculously formal blazer, the kind of stiff, government-issue-looking thing a politician might wear, but he wore it with such a devil-may-care slouch that it somehow looked trendy, lively even. But Liam held no prejudice against him. There was an age gap between them, and their paths rarely crossed. From what he knew, Dylan's only real flaw was a revolving door of girlfriends. He'd never heard of him bullying anyone or throwing his weight around. In fact, he was known to be quite generous. Dylan Sloan, for all his faults, had a moral baseline. That was one reason Liam was willing to be friendly. The other was more strategic. Dylan's grandfather was gone, but the family's influence couldn't be allowed to fade too quickly. The old man's children were from a later marriage, all younger and spoiled rotten. He had been an impeccable man who had made great contributions to his country, but he'd failed to instill that same discipline in his heirs. Still, an investigation had shown that while the Sloans were mostly ineffectual, they weren't criminals. Dylan spent his own money on his relationships, a fair trade in his eyes. His values might be skewed, but in a society where influencers screamed that a man who didn't spend money on you didn't love you, was it so wrong? By that logic, Dylan's love was profound. He just had a lot of it to give to a lot of different people. The powers that we didn't care who had wealth. They just wanted the wealthy to stay quiet. So, Liam's greeting was a signal, a gesture of goodwill from a certain faction. He was just a kid, but he represented a particular point of view. "Dylan, man," Liam said, the grin finally breaking through. "Leave it to you to make a stuffy blazer look like you just rolled off a runway. That's a special talent." Being addressed so casually by Liam caught Dylan off guard, but in a good way. He was older, sure, but Liam had called Leo by his first name, too. It felt comfortable. Whoever said Liam Ingram was a tyrant hadn't actually met the guy. He was polite, sharp, and a damn sight better than most of the aimless trust fund kids Dylan knew. "It was awesome," Dylan said, his voice genuine. "Leo's cooking is unreal, world-class. I honestly didn't want to leave, but he finished the painting for the general, so I figured I should bring it over. A good excuse to pay my respects." Dylan shamelessly copied Liam's familiar use of Leo's first name. All those young master titles were fine for messing around with friends, but in front of elders, it was just awkward. Using a last name felt too formal, too distant, almost like a joke. Liam didn't keep him standing in the doorway. He ushered him inside. Rumors had been swirling that General Ingram was on his deathbed, while others claimed he was fit as a fiddle, eating a whole rack of ribs for dinner. The reality Dylan saw was somewhere in between. He wasn't at death's door, but he certainly wasn't eating ribs. He was thinner than Dylan remembered, and on his large frame, the weight loss gave him a hollowed-out look. Yet his eyes were clear, his spirit intact. He was sitting propped up in a chair, wearing simple gray sweats and cotton slippers. The sight hit Dylan like a punch to the gut. His own grandfather had looked just like that toward the end. He'd seen him every day, dressed just the same, and never once considered that he might just be gone one day. He'd always assumed his grandfather, the rock of the family, would outlive him and his laundry list of bad habits. "Dylan," the general said, his voice a quiet rasp. Dylan snapped back to the present, realizing he'd been staring. If he were more of an actor, he might have let the moisture in his eyes well up, might have said something like, "Seeing you, General, is like seeing my grandfather again. I miss him." The sentiment was real, after all. The ambitious climbers of the world surely felt real emotions on their way up. The old guard had seen enough fakers to spot one a mile away. But Dylan wasn't wired for that kind of emotional subtlety. He couldn't bring himself to say it. Instead, he masked the feeling with a grin. "General, good to see you," he said, forcing a laugh that chased the wetness from his eyes. "You know, you gave me a scare just now. You look exactly like the painting Leo did. I saw it in his studio the other day and jumped out of my skin then, too." General Ingram smiled. So, young Dylan was calling him Leo now, was he? The kid was half his age and looked even younger, but Dylan said it without a hint of irony. He was a smooth talker, but not in an annoying way. Underneath it all, he was surprisingly sincere. The sight of the general, his face etched with illness, had transported Dylan Sloan back to his grandfather's last days. For a swaggering playboy like him, a moment of genuine vulnerability was so uncomfortable that his first instinct was to deflect. He pivoted back to the painting, the reason he was here. His gifts, like offerings a relative brings when visiting an elder in the countryside, had been left near the entrance. You don't carry a live chicken and a case of motor oil into the bedroom. The general, intrigued by his comment, wanted to see the portrait. Liam sent someone to uncrate it. Dylan didn't just sit there. He sensed that both the general and Liam were genuinely interested in Leo. So he started recounting his trip, editing out the part about delivering a multi-million-dollar horse to Leo's ranch. Some things are better done than said. "I went to hang out with Leo. Haven't been back to a campus in ages, you know? He told me he goes for a morning run every day. So I showed up at the crack of dawn. I thought I was early, but he and his roommates were already waiting for me at the gate. We get inside, start warming up, and get this, his warm-up partner is a math professor. A math professor. I saw the old guy and got so nervous I started hiccuping. But then we start running. I figured I'm in decent shape. I hit the gym, but man, running outside is a different beast. I was gassed after a few laps. But Leo, he just kept going, lap after lap, super focused. I always thought his TikToks were just for show, but no, the guy actually runs. Every single day. It's insane. I couldn't get out of bed the next morning. And his roommate, the kind of dark, quiet one, the dude was carrying a camera, chasing us the whole time, and didn't even break a sweat. Dylan's unfiltered commentary, complete with odd descriptions like dark and quiet one, was exactly why his family had given up on him ever entering politics. In the structured world of government, his mouth would make a new enemy every day. But here, with elders who weren't expecting a statesman, it was just refreshing. In his younger days, General Ingram would have told him to speak properly. Now, in the quiet solitude of his illness, he found he enjoyed the chatter of a young man who wasn't afraid to just talk. And Leo does everything himself. He cleans the fish, he cracks the eggs, and he's so meticulous. The guy has insane patience. He's serious about running, he's serious about cooking, and whatever he does, he crushes it. His running form is perfect, and his food is unbelievable. He trailed off for a second. I didn't want to come back. Luckily, when I left, he packed up some of that old-fashioned sponge cake and a jar of his homemade hot sauce for me. He'd spent all afternoon making extra. "Grandpa Ingram," he said, the honorific slipping out naturally. "That sponge cake is life-changing. I'm not exaggerating. You have to try it." The hot sauce was incredible too, the kind you could eat with a spoon, but he knew better than to offer it to an elderly man with a weak stomach. In the middle of his story, the staff brought in the cake and some tea. The general was only allowed warm water or a protein drink, but the tea was a fragrant dragon well for the younger man, a perfect complement to cut the sweetness of the cake. Just then, Secretary Ingram arrived home from work. He moved with an imposing, purposeful stride that instantly silenced Dylan, who shrank into a posture of pure, unadulterated compliance. The secretary's timing was perfect. Seeing the cake, he launched into his usual routine, coaxing his father to eat by eating enthusiastically himself. He grabbed a small, fluffy cake and popped it in his mouth. Then another, and another. This was genuinely delicious. General Ingram's eyebrow twitched. "You can stop now. I don't need your encouragement today. And for God's sake, leave some for the rest of us." There were only a few cakes left. Liam had already set one aside for his grandfather. Dylan had one to prove how good they were. Liam had taken one for himself. The plate was nearly empty. Secretary Ingram, oblivious, reached for another. What was the big deal? It was just cake. They could buy more. Dad, Liam said, his voice tight. Dad, what? The secretary mumbled through a mouthful. Those were handmade by Leo. For Grandpa. And Dylan personally carried them all the way here. The secretary froze. The piece of cake in his throat slid down with a surprisingly loud gulp. He, who had just inhaled 4 of them, looked at the empty plate in shame. Only then did General Ingram slowly begin to eat his piece. He hadn't expected much. His taste buds had been dulled by his illness and medication. Everything tasted bitter, and he was often nauseous. But as he took a bite, a wave of pure, unadulterated flavor washed over him. 1 piece of cake, for people. If this were a question on a civil service exam, how would you answer? The question isn't about cake. It's about the fair allocation of resources, procedural justice, and decision-making capabilities. The core principle is transparency and fairness. The solution, therefore, is the same one a kindergartner would offer. Cut it into 4 equal pieces. But for the exam, you need to justify it. The act of equal division demonstrates a commitment to equality in the distribution of public resources, avoiding favoritism. But that's only a third of the points. Next, you must outline the procedure to ensure fairness. The grandson, Liam, should be designated as the cutter, as he has relationships with all parties and is motivated to avoid family conflict. The other 3 will supervise. To ensure precision, tools such as a knife and a scale should be used. Finally, the distribution order must reflect respect for elders. General Ingram chooses first, followed by Secretary Ingram, then the guest, Dylan Sloan. The cutter, Liam, chooses last, thus incentivizing him to cut as equally as possible. This solution demonstrates fairness, honors family hierarchy, and respects social protocols. Of course, this wasn't an exam. This was real life. As Dylan remembered, he still had more in the car. Secretary Ingram reached for the last piece of cake on the plate, hesitated, then placed it gently on his father's plate. Dad comes first. The general shot him a glare, but accepted it. The sponge cake was light and airy, no bigger than his palm. He could manage 2. At his age, there was no room for false modesty over a piece of cake. He ate it slowly, taking a sip of warm water, and felt a profound sense of satisfaction. That young man, Leo, had a gift. Just then, a soft knock came at the door. The painting was ready. The household staff were professionals. They wouldn't just roll in a loose canvas. They had mounted it on an easel, ensuring it was stable and perfectly lit for viewing. When they had been uncrating it, even they, people whose expertise was in discretion and service, not art, had been stunned. Up close, it was just a painting. But from a few feet back, it was as if General Ingram himself were sitting right there, alive and breathing. 2 of them carried the easel in and positioned it in a clear space before silently exiting. The light in the room was soft, designed to simulate daylight and be easy on the eyes. Outside, the winter sun had already set. Dylan knew he should take his leave after this. He'd seen the family squabble over cake. He didn't need to stay for dinner and discover any more of their strange dynamics. Besides, if they fought like that over a single sponge cake, their daily meals must be terribly bland. He had his excuse ready. He had a date with that brilliant ex-girlfriend who'd randomly sent him money. He normally never saw exes again. There were business partners whose contract had expired, but Holly Lynn was an anomaly. He thought he was prepared for the painting. He'd seen the unfinished version. After all, he was wrong. The moment the finished portrait was in place, Dylan let out a strangled cough, spraying a fine mist of cake crumbs from between his teeth. Thankfully, he was too far away to hit the canvas. In the dim, cavernous light of Leo's studio, the unfinished work had looked unervingly real. But this was different. This was the chasm between a masterpiece in progress and a masterpiece completed. Now he understood why it had felt so heavy on the drive over. He hadn't been carrying a painting. He'd been carrying General Ingram on his back. His shoulders still ached from the weight of it. Dylan Sloan tactfully made his exit, skipping dinner with the excuse that he had plans. It was a clumsy reason, the kind that would get you blacklisted in political circles. What plans could possibly be more important than dinner with a general? But for Dylan, whose entire persona was built on being charmingly unreliable, it worked. They accepted him for who he was. With Dylan gone, Liam and his father stayed to eat with the general. The old man had his son take a photo of the oil painting, then complained about the quality and had his grandson retake it. He then posed for a picture with the portrait, his expression softening for Liam, who managed to capture a genuinely good shot. During the meal, Liam remembered the hot sauce Dylan had also brought. A bottle was produced, and soon father and son were nearly coming to blows over the last spoonfuls. General Ingram watched them, unimpressed. Let me try a bite, he thought. I'll be the judge. Both men shot down the idea immediately. Later, feeling a bit full from the cake and annoyed by his family's antics, the general opened the private group chat with his old comrades and posted the photos of the cake and the painting. The cake picture was met with silence. Old Ingram is really getting senile, they probably thought. What's next? Forwarded chain messages from some conspiracy blog, but when he sent the picture of the portrait, the chat exploded. One by one, the old titans emerged from the woodwork. Old Mr. Preston was the first to reply. That's just showing off. Another wrote, still handsome, Ingram. You always were. The artist is brilliant. It's strangely moving. Ingram, you need to get back on your feet. I don't want to see you in a painting. I want to see you in person. Our time may be over, but we can still watch over the next generation. Hang in there, old friend. Little longer. The chat, usually dormant, buzzed with activity, a rare alignment of retired stars, before flickering back into silence. Old men weren't supposed to spend too much time on their phones. Leo hung up the phone. Stella was already awake, having stirred when he answered. She'd laid out a fresh set of clothes for him. Hearing the voice on the other end of the line cooing about how he shouldn't work too hard, she'd almost lost it, shooting him a playful, exasperated look. Now dressed, Leo checked his phone. A message from Dylan. Painting, cake, and hot sauce delivered to Liam Ingram. Mission accomplished. He'd attached a photo, showing he'd kept a small portion for himself. Leo sent back a thank you emoji. Dylan, meanwhile, was directing his driver to a nursery. He needed a potted plant, something with soil. He remembered Holly Lynn liked plants she could nurture, not cut flowers that were already dying. With a flowering plant and the rest of the sponge cake in hand, he headed for the address he'd finally managed to track down, the Chesterfield Institute for Advanced Studies. The name alone made him want to turn back. But he was already here. Back at Northwood, Stella was driving her Bentley, Leo riding shotgun. After the luxury, he was starting to think getting a driver's license was overrated. They headed straight for the private kitchen at the Honors College. His roommates, seeing him in a fresh change of clothes, knew exactly what was up. Sean wouldn't notice the details, but Alex and Jordan? They understood immediately. Jessica Monroe was already there, helping out. She used to work part-time jobs all the time, so this felt familiar. She refused any pay. She felt she'd already received more than enough. That box of tea, she discovered, was listed for $2,800 for 100 grams on a boutique website. The world of tea was insane. She'd mailed it to Ms. Zhu, along with a screenshot of the price. Ms. Zhu had promptly Venmo'd her $10,000. So, with a complicated mix of gratitude and a desperate desire to stay close to him before their lives diverged completely after graduation, Jessica was here. Meanwhile, in Japan, Mr. Mikami received his own express delivery of tea from Joyrin. The box itself was a work of art, a lacquered wood chest with intricate chrysanthemum patterns on the small tin canisters inside. For all their talk of preserving ancient crafts, they could never forget that the roots of their traditions came from China. He carefully bathed and dressed in his most formal attire, a silk Motsuki Haori hakama, the traditional formal wear for Japanese men. Only then, with the proper reverence, did he begin the ritual of brewing the tea. Ever since discovering Leo's TikTok, Mr. Mikami had started his own channel. He'd gained a small following, though the comments weren't always friendly. Returning to campus felt like retreating to your home base in League of Legends, a safe zone where you could slowly regenerate your health and energy. Leo had overslept. If not for that early morning phone call, he might have slept through the afternoon. The sacred, energy-draining ritual of human procreation was a serious workout. Luckily, the menu he'd set was forgiving. He changed into his new chef's uniform, and suddenly, the kitchen was his kingdom. Stella had them custom-made. They'd sent over 2 preliminary versions, a strange but welcome service. The coat was black with crisp white trim. On the hanger, it looked a little grim, like something a high-fashion undertaker would wear. But on him, the effect was stunning. The cut was impeccable, accentuating his strengths and hiding any flaws, instantly bumping his 8 out of 10 good looks to an 8.5. The sleek lines made him seem taller, the collar framed his neck perfectly, and the overall proportions were so flattering it could turn a 5'9" guy into a 6-footer, visually speaking. Leo himself didn't notice. He'd never been insecure about his looks, even before he was handsome. He just appreciated that the sleeves were tailored so they wouldn't dip into the soup and the fabric was comfortable. There was even a matching hat that somehow managed to not flatten his hair while framing his face, making him look clean-cut, refined, and surprisingly elegant. The whole look elevated the kitchen's vibe. Chef Wu had been practicing the steamed fish recipe, but something was missing. His version was good, not fishy, perfectly edible, but lacked that unforgettable, craveable quality that made you want to come back for more. It was the difference between an 80 and a 100. On paper, it's only 20 points, but in reality, the gap is a canyon. As soon as Leo returned, Sean was there, camera in hand, to capture footage. His hard drive was now meticulously organized with clips for future videos. He had dozens of snippets of Leo cleaning fish, documenting his progression from a clumsy beginner chasing a slippery fish across the counter to a master whose knife moved with fluid, deadly precision. The process was therapeutic to watch, for humans, anyway, not so much for the fish. Leo had also changed. He'd started this journey chasing system rewards, forcing himself through tasks. Now, he found genuine pleasure in the process itself, in the quiet satisfaction of doing something well. As he focused on the flame under his wok, a real flame was always better than an induction cooktop. The system's mechanical voice echoed in his mind. Host has received the sincere gratitude and blessing of a diamond tier target, General Ingram. Reward, lifespan +1. Current lifespan, 21/72. 1/110, current projected maximum. Reward, skill catalyst, intermediate, X1. Host may choose one skill to advance by one level. It must have been the painting. The rewards from these top-tier people were on another level, who just gives away years of life. As the notification faded, Leo felt the day's fatigue wash away, replaced by a surge of vitality. He also had a skill upgrade to ponder, a powerful tool. He'd have to think carefully about which skill to choose. After finishing the fish and checking on the soup, he saw that everyone was busy. Even Jordan was expertly mixing drinks for guests who had made special requests. Others were running food and handling problems. Even Stella had a job. A parent, utterly absorbed in her meal, had spotted the smiley face sticker on Stella's blouse, the staff's identifier for the night, and impressed by the high-caliber waitress, had handed off her young daughter for babysitting. Sean got permission from the little girl's parents to film her. They were thrilled. The mother, who worked in the cutthroat world of producing web series, was a professional trend chaser. After being let down by 100 overhyped, influencer-approved restaurants, she was moved to tears by a meal that was actually genuinely delicious. Normally, she had to patiently coax her daughter to eat, but tonight, she was too busy savoring every bite herself. The fish was a revelation. That fish had not died in vain. For the first time in a long time, she felt a wave of pure happiness. Her daughter, a chubby little thing, ended up devouring 2 bowls of rice with a fish and broth. It was another unforgettable night for the diners. Later, as the staff sat down for their own meal, the kitchen felt strangely empty without Dylan Sloan, who had become a fixture at their employee dinners. Leo remembered his promise and told everyone Dylan had left gifts for them. Dylan, meanwhile, was indeed having a late-night meal, but it wasn't at a club. Incredibly, Holly Lynn, the brilliant ex-girlfriend, owned her own place near the Research Institute. It was a small apartment in an older building, but she transformed the 65-square-meter space into what felt like a sprawling 2-bedroom with 2 living areas. The ground-floor unit had a sunken sunroom that she'd filled with plants, bookshelves, and cozy chairs. It was the smallest home he'd ever been in, yet it felt warmer and more comfortable than his family's mansion. He had come over to help her with the plant he'd brought, but she insisted on making him dinner. As he sat on her couch, watching her move around the open kitchen, he felt an unfamiliar sense of peace and dozed off. He woke up to the smell of noodles. She had made 2 steaming bowls, each topped with a perfectly cooked egg. Honestly, the taste was just okay. After the culinary tour de force he'd been on, it was plain, but it had the taste of home. It was the kind of meal that made a man think about settling down. The steam wasn't just fogging up his eyes, it was fogging up his heart. Back at the dorm, the gift opening commenced. Hannah-chan was surprised to even receive one. When she saw the box of ultra-high-end skincare, she sighed. She knew it was expensive, but it was completely wasted on her. Jordan, however, reacted as if he'd won the lottery. He let out a whoop of joy, cradling the hideously ugly, limited-edition sneakers like a newborn babe. "I love them," he shrieked, kissing the box. Alex opened his gift to find a pair of discreetly luxurious cufflinks. They were perfect, a subtle, tasteful accessory for a guy who was meticulously put together but had few options for personal flair. It was a thoughtful gift, the kind of small extravagance you'd want but would never buy for yourself. Jessica Monroe stared at the solid gold walnut Dylan had given her. It was heavy, real, and completely absurd. It was also, she had to admit, perfectly suited to her love of tangible, valuable assets. After dinner, Dylan ran. He told himself it was because he didn't want to get stuck doing the dishes, but the truth was scarier. For the first time, he was thinking about things like doing the dishes. He was definitely malfunctioning. Back at her apartment, Holly Lynn took a bite of the sponge cake Dylan had brought. Her eyes went wide. How could a simple cake be this good? It was pure, unadulterated happiness in a bite. After washing the dishes, she treated herself to another piece, pairing it with a cup of floral tea and a book, Path Integral Methods in Quantum Field Theory, 2nd edition. Every day, she was a little more knowledgeable than the day before. Leo, too, ended his day having learned something new. He hadn't studied Dr. Shun's herbal medicine texts, but he had delved deeper into human anatomy, preparing for his future practice in massage and acupuncture. He was also a little more knowledgeable than the day before. After returning to the dorm and seeing Jordan's ecstatic reaction to the sneakers. No. 91 out of a limited run of 4,491, a true collector's item. Leo finally lay down. His phone rang. It was Professor Hoffman. Leo, got the tea you sent. Hoffman's cheerful voice boomed. It's excellent. I took the box for Judge Cole over to his place, and we tried it. The old man loves it. Professor Hoffman was pleased. By sending the tea through him, Leo had shown tactical grace, reinforcing Hoffman's own relationship with the judge. Leo, in reality, had simply forgotten the judge's exact address and figured this was easier. Glad he likes it, Professor. My friend Joy makes it. She's very talented. Your Aunt Miranda was there too, and she was also quite taken with it. Leo understood the hint. I'll get her contact info and send her a box. Hoffman chuckled, satisfied. The conversation then shifted to his wife's upcoming TV show, The Chancellor's Gambit. Penelope is nervous, but she's also confident. She said the last time she felt this way about a project was right before Chesapeake Tides came out. Leo could hear the excitement in his voice. To have another shot at your career's peak in your golden years was a rare gift. Chesapeake Tides have been a cultural phenomenon. That's amazing news, Professor. Congratulations to her. I'll take you both out to dinner to celebrate when it airs. I'll hold you to that, Hoffman said warmly before hanging up. Leo had almost forgotten about his bit part in the show. He was only on set for a few days. He probably didn't have much screen time. After watching Sean edit videos, he knew how easily a rookie actor could end up on the cutting room floor. He wasn't worried. He'd done his job and hadn't caused any trouble. Whatever happened, he wouldn't be the one to blame if it flopped. Satisfied, he fell asleep almost instantly. Meanwhile, director Ian Shaw, who had hitched his own show's publicity wagon to Penelope's, was rushing his production to keep pace. But he was older now, more interested in his young wife and luxurious vacations than the grueling work of directing. His set was notoriously lax. His entire strategy was second-rate production, first-rate marketing. His lead actor, Cade, was convinced this was his moment. He didn't know that his future biography would include a painful footnote. Due to a scheduling conflict, he was forced to turn down the role of Silas, the team master in the critically acclaimed series, The Chancellor's Gambit. It was a day like any other. Leo woke up feeling refreshed. Ever since he'd started his running routine, his sleep quality had skyrocketed. He used to sleep for 10 hours and wake up exhausted. Now, he slept for 7 and felt fantastic. He looked over and saw Sean already at his desk, his face illuminated by the glow of his new Alienware laptop. Sean was a grinder. After receiving his cut from Levi, a cool $42,000 after taxes, he'd immediately wired over $8,000 to his mother. His parents had been terrified, convinced he'd sold a kidney. His sister, Sarah, had smoothed things over by telling them it was scholarship money. The money had changed things. The pressure was off. His parents, who had once been hounded by debt, could finally breathe. His mother's health had even improved with the reduction in stress. Local officials, prompted by Leo's quiet donation to the county, had even offered them subsidized housing, a gesture they politely declined at Sarah's insistence. It wouldn't be right to take advantage when Leo had already given so much. Sean was editing the video of Leo singing with the little girl from the restaurant. The song was simple, but Leo's voice had a quality that calmed the soul and lifted the spirits. It was a magic that even a compressed TikTok video couldn't completely erase. Leo headed out for his run, helping the dorm's RA move some boxes on his way out. He met Professor Reed at their usual spot for warm-ups, their conversation now easy and familiar. The tea is a hit, by the way, she said, stretching. Arthur told me that Japanese team master posted a video praising it, and now he's recommending it to the Imperial household. They placed a massive order. I even bought some myself to send to a few old friends. Leo remembered he had a 20% stake in that venture. Joy had initially planned to sell it for around $260 a pound. He asked Professor Reed, how much are they charging for it now? Well, Arthur said since we're old friends, he gave me the wholesale price. The retail is listed at $19.5 for a 100-gram box, so he gave it to me for half that, $97.50. I ordered 23 boxes. Leo did the math. The price had gone from a few £100 to nearly $7,000. This was insane. How could Dr. Lee charge his friends that much? Professor Reed laughed. Don't worry. Arthur knows better than to cheat me. After I placed the order, he sent over a Song Dynasty GN or teacup as a gift. It's worth about 30 grand. Leo understood. This was business among friends. You don't discount the product. You maintain its value publicly. But privately, you exchange gifts and favors. It was a language he was slowly learning to speak. During his run, the track was more crowded than usual. Students cramming for exams tried to absorb knowledge in the crisp morning air. Leo ran with Moose on a leash, a necessary precaution given the dog's size. After a few laps, Moose had had enough. He dug in his paws and refused to move, whining and tugging toward the infield. Woof, 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 he barked, which Leo interpreted as, I'm done, old man. This is boring. Let me teach you how to properly mark your territory on a telephone pole. Learn a useful skill for once. Leo relented, letting the big dog wander the grassy field. Afterward, Moose led him with purpose toward the student strip, straight to a back alley. There, he located a particularly robust papaya tree and, with great ceremony, lifted his leg and thoroughly anointed it. No wonder this tree was thriving. Moose then barked at Leo expectantly. Your turn? Leo tugged him away. He bribed Moose with the promise of corn dogs, and the dog trotted along happily. At the breakfast burrito cart, Leo ordered 4 corn dogs and a plain burrito for himself. He found the simple version was the best. The cart owner grinned. That food festival you mentioned? I told the organizer you were a regular, and he gave me a great spot. You have to come try it. It's on me. Leo had completely forgotten about the festival. That was Alex's project. Typical Alex, quietly getting things done without any fanfare. He picked up the food and headed to the legendary breakfast bowl stand. The owner, a woman whose stunning figure had remained unchanged for the 4 years Leo had been a customer, was dressed stylishly in a turtleneck and a wool jumper dress. He ordered 2 bowls, one for him, fully loaded, and one for Moose with just beef. After their meal, Leo walked a tired Moose back home. The dog collapsed on his favorite rug, content. Leo returned to the dorm with breakfast for his roommates. Even a multimillionaire had to bring back food for the guys. As they ate, he suddenly got a call from Dylan Sloan. Leo, my man, Dylan said, his voice laced with exasperation. Hypothetically, is your restaurant hiring? I got a candidate for you. Leo's mind raced. The restaurant was running smoothly. Bringing in some spoiled rich kid would be a disaster. He tried to think of a polite way to say no. Now, before you say anything, Dylan continued, hear me out. He's a friend of mine, a third-generation trust fund baby who's even more of a screw-up than I am. He'll work for free. And, get this, his family is in high-end construction. That abandoned villa on your horse ranch? He'll have his family's crew finish it for you. All expenses paid. Leo's response was immediate and heartfelt. When can he start? After running from Holly's apartment last night, Dylan had felt a strange unease. As a seasoned veteran of the dating scene, he knew she was into him. But with her, he felt oddly powerless. His usual currency, money, gifts, extravagant gestures, was useless. Holly was fiercely independent. Faced with genuine emotion, he panicked and fled. A call from his friends led him to a familiar nightclub, but the blaring music and flashing lights did nothing for him. It all felt pointless. He left early, only to get a call from an older acquaintance, the brother of one of his buddies, a guy who never gave him the time of day. This guy was now asking Dylan to get his younger brother a job at Leo's restaurant, offering to finish the villa project as payment. The world was a strange place. The moment his family's influence had waned, this kid, Zhu Xiaopan, nicknamed Piggy by Dylan for his own ridiculous nickname for Dylan, hadn't kicked him when he was down. And now his powerful older brother was calling with a deal. Dylan couldn't help but laugh. Piggy was going to have to work for a living. It was poetic justice. After ending the call with Dylan, Leo immediately delegated. He called Hannah-chan, who was managing things at the restaurant, and let her know an intern would be starting soon. He told her to treat him like any other student worker, which she correctly interpreted as handle this VIP with care. He then sent a quick text to Mr. Liu, Stella's father's assistant, to give him a heads up as well. With the tasks assigned, his mind felt clear. He headed to the classroom where Wendy Liu and Colin Edwards, the 2 grad school-bound NPCs of his study routine, were already hard at work. He handed them each a small box of sponge cake. In return, they had a bottle of yogurt waiting for him, a ritual born from a shared secret. Leo's discovery from a book that yogurt could improve one's mood. He sat down and activated his time dilation buff, diving into his Japanese studies. After that, he switched to the complex medical text from Dr. Shun, his Mont Blanc pen, a gift from Paige, gliding across the page as he copied notes and diagrams. His penmanship was getting noticeably better, smoother and more elegant with each passing day. As he finished a particularly dense chapter on herbal remedies, the mechanical voice sounded in his head. Host has demonstrated diligence in the study of traditional medicine and dedication to the art of calligraphy. Reward: 50% of the penmanship mastery of Thomas Jefferson has been unlocked. Leo waited for a few minutes before Stella finally appeared, navigating the midday crowd of students crisscrossing the main quad. At first, Leo hadn't been used to the stairs, the way people's eyes would linger on him. But then he thought about Alex. Alex held half a dozen titles on campus: student government, president of this club, head of that association. Half the student body knew him and would call out a greeting. Alex never seemed fazed by it, always responding with a confident wave. Compared to that, a few extra glances were nothing. At least no one was shouting, "Hey, it's Senator Foster," or "President Foster," or "Secretary Foster," every 5 feet. That would be genuinely awkward. Leo figured Alex used the different titles to remember how he knew each person. For a small state school, Northwood had a surprising number of official positions. He was slowly getting used to the attention. College students were generally reserved enough not to shout at him. Besides, his TikTok fame wasn't exactly A-list level. A few million followers was just a drop in the bucket. And since he never tried to hide or act embarrassed, people just got used to seeing him around. The moment he stopped treating it like a big deal, everyone else did too. It was like the university president. Everyone knew who he was, but nobody chased him around yelling, "Look, it's the president." So Leo waited patiently. When Stella finally came into view, she stood out instantly, a beacon in the sea of students. She wore a pair of crisp, dark blue jeans, a black sweater, and a matching dark blue Chanel-style tweed jacket, the kind woven with subtle gold threads that gave it a structured, almost masculine silhouette. Her legs were incredibly long, a fact Leo had personally verified, and her proportions were perfect. It was strange. Whenever the system granted him a height increase, it never seemed to target just his legs. He had a sneaking suspicion Stella's legs were still longer than his. Her hair had grown out a bit lately, caught in that stylishly messy phase between a short cut and a true bob, almost like a soft mullet. Paired with her sharp features, the look was impossibly cool. Maybe it was because Leo had always been so average that he was so captivated by Stella's icy, chic vibe. But after getting to know her, he discovered the coolness was just a facade. In reality, she was gentle and incredibly thoughtful, which was why he started to panic when he saw her approaching. Her eyes were red, and the tip of her nose was pink. Had she been crying? What happened? Did the Vance family go bankrupt? Did something happen to her parents? It couldn't be. But if it was, he had some savings now. He could definitely support his girlfriend. Before he could ask, she closed the distance and threw herself into his arms, burying her head in his shoulder. Usually, in public, she was more reserved, limiting their affection to holding hands. But now, she clung to him so tightly he could feel the dampness of her tears seeping into his shirt. "Baby, what's wrong?" he asked softly. She just cried, her body pressed against his. On screen, she had just watched him die. Watched as the woman his character loved, completely oblivious, put on her wedding dress and stepped into the ceremonial carriage. The contrast, the tragic beauty of it all, had shattered her. Her heart felt hollow, aching with a grief so sharp it was physical. How could Penelope Hayes create something so powerful? Seeing the real Leo standing in front of her now felt like a miracle, like getting back something precious she had lost. The solid warmth of his embrace made her feel whole again, her heart settling back into place. She couldn't bear that kind of ending, not even in her imagination. Back in their dorm room, Jessica was having a full-blown meltdown. A natural pessimist, she'd been completely destroyed by the scene. The moment Stella left, she had let out a gut-wrenching sob, crying until she was exhausted. Afterward, oddly, she felt better, cleansed. Sometimes a person cries not because of the thing right in front of them, but because that thing is just the trigger. You cry for everything at once, all the sadness you bottled up because you didn't have a good enough reason to let it out. Then one comes along, and the dam breaks. After wiping her face, she felt a sense of relief. At least in the real world, Julianne was still alive. And Silas, Leo's character, was still alive too. That was good. That was more than enough. Leo and Stella walked toward the library. It was the middle of winter, but they found themselves taking a detour to the small gazebo halfway up the hill. And then, for some reason, they kept going, wandering through the quiet campus cemetery. Leo still didn't know what had upset her so much, but it was the first time he'd ever seen her cry. Well, not counting that. A traitorous thought flickered through his mind. God, I'm a terrible person. Seeing the corners of her eyes still pink and raw, his brain immediately conjured images of them in bed, when her eyes would get that same flushed, vulnerable look, long lashes wet and glistening. But today, she was just incredibly clingy. She leaned into him as they walked, her body pressing against his side. Normally, she'd just hold his hand, maintaining a little space. Today, she seemed to want no space at all. Still, it was broad daylight in a cemetery. Not exactly the time or place. The grounds were peaceful, overseen by a stooped old man who seemed to be the universal standard for cemetery caretakers. It was a lonely job with low pay, but for some old-timer from a nearby town, it was enough to get by. Most students saw it as a depressing gig, but Leo knew that after graduation, many of them would realize what a great job it was. Low stress, no difficult customers. The only residents you had to worry about weren't going anywhere. After they left the cemetery, Leo finally found out why Stella had been crying, and he couldn't help but laugh. If she didn't know him, maybe he'd get it. But they saw each other every day. To get that heartbroken over a fictional character he played. And for it to be Stella, of all people. "Baby, you're so adorable," he said, playfully nipping the tip of her nose. Stella just stared at him. Well, so much for being sad. The tragic, handsome, quietly vengeful Silas from the show was one thing. The real-life version was basically a puppy who liked to bite people. And that ridiculous pet name, Baby, she had no idea when he'd started using it, but it rolled off his tongue so easily now. The worst part was, she'd gotten used to it. It didn't even sound cringy anymore. She remembered hearing one of her old roommates on the phone with her long-distance boyfriend, cooing Baby back and forth, and getting secondhand embarrassment so bad she'd break out in goosebumps. Now here she was. It was true what they said, never say never. On the way to the library, Leo playfully bit her cheek a few more times. All sadness had officially evaporated, replaced by the distinct feeling of saliva and faint teeth marks on her skin. At the library entrance, they were still holding hands, nearly trying to go through the turnstile together. The old librarian at the desk shot them a stern look before recognizing them and letting it go with a quiet sigh. The library was for studying, not for canoodling. Too many students used it as a date spot these days, but this particular student was different. After Leo's TikToks film in the library went viral, Northwood State's library had landed on a national top 10 most beautiful college libraries list. It was perched right on the lake, and from the reading room, one entire wall of glass offered a panoramic view of the water, often shrouded in mist with small islands peeking through. The scenery was so stunningly beautiful that students from other schools had started coming just to see it. It had definitely increased the staff's workload. But after years of quiet, monotonous days, the new energy was a welcome change. Plus, President Grant had been smart about it. With more traffic came more work, but instead of just demanding more from the staff, she'd adjusted their pay, adding bonuses tied directly to the number of students who swiped in. The more students used the library, the more the staff earned. It was a win-win-win. The staff was motivated, the students were spending more time in a productive environment, and the university was getting free publicity. So, when the librarian saw the two good-looking kids trying to squeeze through the gate together, she just pushed her heavy glasses up her nose and looked away. Once inside, Leo was curious about the scene Stella had mentioned, but he resisted the urge to look it up online. It felt a little embarrassing. Instead, he went to find a book about Penelope Hayes's work and found a script analysis of Chesapeake tides. It was an old, well-worn copy, its spine softened from being opened by countless hands over the years. He loved finding books like that in the library, books that felt like they had lived many lives. The first person to check this one out was probably middle-aged by now. Stella, meanwhile, picked up a book titled Vermeer's Light, A Study in Stillness, mostly because she liked the elegant, earth-tone cover. She was starting to get influenced by Leo. He always chose his books at random, telling her once that discovering a book without looking for it was like a happy accident. At the time, she hadn't thought much of it, but now she found the idea charming. She decided to try it, picking a book with lots of pictures. The Chesapeake Tides analysis was comprehensive. It included the full script, behind-the-scenes anecdotes, and a section on the show's reception. Interviews with Penelope, newspaper clippings, and even letters from viewers. It was a fascinating time capsule. The language in the old news reports was so earnest, talking about leading the construction of spiritual civilization. Nowadays, people just posted on their Instagram story or wrote a review on Rotten Tomatoes. Back then, They wrote actual letters to the television station, pouring out their feelings. Leo skimmed to the viewer mail section first. One letter was from a woman who said she saw herself in one of the characters, Little Hemp Flower, and that the show had given her the strength to keep going during a dark time. She'd made peace with herself and her family. Reading the letters, one after another, Leo was struck by the raw emotion, a heartfelt connection that felt almost foreign in the age of fleeting social media posts. In Washington, D.C., the leaves on the old persimmon tree in the courtyard turned a fiery orange, then fell, day by day, until only the bare skeletal branches remained. It was a process both agonizingly slow and startlingly fast. One day you'd watch a single leaf drift to the ground, and the next you'd look up to find the tree was completely naked. General Ingram watched the entire spectacle from his bed. The view from his window perfectly framed the persimmon tree. He'd spent his whole life in motion, never stopping to notice such things. Now, in forced stillness, he was making up for a lifetime of missed tranquility. To his younger self, such melancholy reflections would have seemed like a sickness, a pointless indulgence. Now he understood. Some things you only learn through experience. This morning, however, he woke up feeling different. He looked at the portrait Leo had painted of him, which he refused to let anyone move. It probably should have been professionally framed already, but the general couldn't bear to part with it. It had been painted straight from the heart. The feeling it gave him was hard to explain. It was like how a teenage girl might feel after posting a perfect photo of herself online, basking in the compliments, making it her profile picture, admiring it over and over. The portrait wasn't like a photo with a beauty filter. It didn't erase his wrinkles or the gauntness in his cheeks. It was brutally honest. But somehow, in its honesty, it had captured his spirit, his very essence. It was alive. He, a self-proclaimed brute with no appreciation for high art, knew one thing. This was good. It was profoundly good. Looking at it before he went to sleep, he'd felt a sense of peace, as if he were lulling himself into a deep, restful slumber. He'd slept for 5 uninterrupted hours, something he hadn't managed in years. It felt like a tightly coiled spring had finally been allowed to relax. He felt so good, in fact, that he ate 2 pieces of the simple sponge cake, the chicken cake, for breakfast. Yesterday, he'd watched his son and grandson practically fight over the last of the hot sauce Leo had made. He'd want to try some himself this morning, only to find the 2 rascals had taken the entire jar with them, not even leaving the empty container behind. The cake was delicious. It wasn't as cloyingly sweet as the ones from his childhood, yet tasted exactly like his memory of them. He knew if he could magically transport a piece of cake from the past to the present, it would be dry, coarse, and sickeningly sweet. But the one Leo made carried the weight of that memory perfectly. The kid was attentive. He put his heart into everything he did, from painting to cooking. After a short walk and his morning session of Dr. Shun's mindful restoration technique, he felt a renewed sense of vigor. As he visualized the persimmon tree, he no longer saw decay, but a necessary shedding in preparation for new growth. Death, he thought, was its own form of legacy. Just as he was finishing, visitors arrived. People didn't just drop in on a man of his stature. This visit had been arranged. It was a delegation from the Department of Veterans Affairs. They were there for a routine wellness check, but also for a specific request. An important upcoming national celebration would feature an exhibit of portraits of the nation's most distinguished generals since its founding. They needed a portrait of him for the display. The event would be attended by leaders from around the world. Back in the library, Leo finished the book on Chesapeake tides. It felt less like a script analysis and more like a historical novel, a window into his parents' and grandparents' generation. The show's plot was deceptively simple, a warm and funny slice of life that followed its characters through half a lifetime. Even Penelope Hayes couldn't explain its monumental success. The critics couldn't either. It was a perfect storm, the right show at the right time, when television was at the peak of its cultural power. It was a landmark, and after a triumph like that, everything else she did seemed like a step down. Stella looked up from her book and met his eyes. Once he started reading, he was completely absorbed. She, on the other hand, found herself watching him as much as she read her book. The library was the perfect place for it. The quiet hum of the room, the rows of books, the stunning view of the lake outside the window. It was a space that could never disappoint you. When Leo was done, they returned their books and headed out, a gnawing hunger in Leo's stomach. They were walking back to the restaurant, his restaurant. It was strange to think that not long ago, she had been the one inviting him there for a meal. Now it was their home base. As they walked, his hand swinging hers, the system's mechanical voice chimed at his head. Host has diligently studied, a critical analysis of Chesapeake tides, and formed a unique understanding of the relationship between environment and narrative. Reward: intermediate item, skill of little hemp flour. You have acquired the advanced culinary skill, fried dough twists. As a child, little hemp flour always watched her mother fry dough twists for the new year, the crispy, fragrant snack a core memory of happiness. As a mother herself, she passed on the tradition, creating happy memories for her own children. Leo blinked. That was a random one, but he did remember his grandmother making them when he was a kid. It felt like magic, the way she could conjure delicious snacks out of thin air. He hadn't had them in years. Seeing that the afternoon classes were about to let out, he grabbed Stella's hand, and they broke into a run, trying to beat the swarm of students that would soon flood the student strip. When they got to the restaurant, Chef Wu had the staff meal ready. Jordan and the others were already there, treating it as their breakfast. Jessica joined them, her eyes even puffier than Stella's. How long did she cry? Leo wondered. The meal was loud and lively. Everyone ate quickly, laughing and talking before scattering to their respective tasks. Leo, as always, went upstairs for his non-negotiable nap. Sean, ever considerate, grabbed his Alienware laptop and moved down to the bar to work, where he could catch glimpses of Hannah bustling around. Jordan started experimenting with the espresso machine, pulling up tutorials online. Alex had been swamped all day. The campus food festival, scheduled for the weekend, had exploded in scale. What started as a small campus event was now a citywide affair, with sponsorships from the city's tourism board, thanks in part to Levi's influence. As the lead organizer, Alex was buried in logistics, his top priority being safety. After his nap, Leo felt a sudden craving. He announced his plan for the afternoon. No more chicken cake. Today, he was making fried dough twists. But first, he had to check on a patient. He started a video call with the stable hand at the ranch. The young man had been a nervous wreck for the past day, but Monarch the horse was perfectly fine. The only difference was the sound he made while eating. Before, it was a delicate chew-chew-chew. Now it was more like chew-chew, spit, spit, spit. Monarch, hearing a familiar voice from the small, glowing rectangle, seemed to perk up. Seeing the horse looking so energetic, Leo grinned. Great, I'll brew him another batch right away. After his nap, Leo was ready to make fried dough twists. The system-implanted memory had sparked a real craving. He could almost taste them, crispy, oily, fragrant, and slightly sweet. Sean, of course, was ready to film. It was all part of their daily routine for the Roommate Chronicles. The recipe was simple: flour, eggs, oil, water, salt, and sugar. The real technique was in the kneading. Leo worked lard, rendered by Chef Wu, into a creamy white paste, into the flour with a couple of eggs. The process was long and repetitive, but Leo was used to Sean's camera by now. As he worked the dough, he chatted. I actually learned a poem about this. It's by Sue Dompa, the guy who was always trying to get his whole family hired. It goes something like delicate hands rolled jade-like threads, fried in green oil to a tender gold. Last night's slumber was deep and sound, crushing the golden bracelets on a fair lady's arm. He paused. Now that I've read a few more books, that doesn't really sound like it's about fried dough. Behind the camera, Sean snickered. I also remember my grandma used to make these on the second day of the second lunar month, Leo continued, seamlessly shifting to another anecdote. The story goes that long ago, a village was plagued by poisonous scorpions. One family accidentally made a snack shaped like a scorpion's tail, fried it, and ate it. For the rest of the year, their house was scorpion-free. The tradition spread, and they called it frying scorpion tails. His voice was calm and steady. It was one of the unexpected keys to the TikTok account's success. Amidst the frantic energy of the internet, Leo's unhurried, methodical presence was soothing. People would leave his videos playing in the background while they worked, the quiet, focused energy helping them concentrate. After kneading the dough, he let it rest and went outside to brew Monarch's medicine over an open flame, leaving a kitchen helper to watch the fire. Soon he was back, rolling and twisting the dough into small, uniform shapes. The process was satisfying to watch, a gentle transformation from a lump of dough into neat rows of twists. He heated a pot of oil. When a light heat radiated from the surface, he began dropping them in. They sank, then floated to the top, slowly turning a beautiful golden brown. The air filled with a rich, delicious aroma. A light sheen of sweat formed on Leo's forehead. Sean moved around him, capturing every detail: the dusting of flour on Leo's cheek, the bubbling oil, the golden twists dancing in the pot. The images were simple, mundane even, but through his lens, they became beautiful. As one of their followers had commented, Life isn't perfect, but that doesn't mean it isn't beautiful. The smell of freshly fried dough twists wafted through the restaurant, and a few early customers asked if they could order some. Leo found himself having to make another batch. This time, since it was just for them, he decided to turn it into a group activity. He called everyone over to help shape the dough. It immediately devolved into a playful mess, like kindergartners with Play-Doh. For Stella, who'd been too cool for such things as a child, and whose mother had never made dumplings from scratch, the feeling of the soft, pliable dough in her hands was a revelation. Everyone had their own style. Jordan's twists were so fat they looked like clubs. Alex's were meticulously crafted, but took forever to make. Hannah's were neat and efficient, almost identical to Leo's. But Jessica was the true artist. She didn't just make twists. She sculpted tiny, perfect rabbits, turtles, and horses from the dough, lining them up like a collection of adorable figurines. Stella, meanwhile, struggled, her hands refusing to cooperate with her brain, producing a series of amorphous lumps. Jessica patiently took Stella's hands in her own, guiding her fingers to make a simple rabbit. Alex watched them for a moment, the sight of their hands intertwined, one fair and delicate, the other long and slender with perfectly manicured nails, making him feel a strange pang. From the kitchen doorway, Mr. Lou discreetly snapped a photo on his phone, pretending to check his messages. It was a perfect shot. Leo on the right, a smudge of flour on his cheek, intently focused on his work. Stella on the left, also with flour on her face, laughing brightly as Jessica showed her a tiny dough animal. He sent the picture to his boss with a simple caption, "Look how happy your daughter is." Richard Vance, whose stomach was already churning uncomfortably after a long board meeting, opened his phone to see the image. A smile spread across his face at the sight of his daughter's joy. Then his eyes landed on the boy next to her, the one who also had flour on his face, and the pain in his stomach flared. It wasn't the boy himself that was causing the pain. It was the absence of the hot sauce. He had finished the jar, and now his appetite was gone. He was starving, but nothing sounded good. The kid had no foresight. Why send such a tiny jar? It wasn't even enough for a dog. To make matters worse, the restaurant was becoming a phenomenon. Even his business partners were talking about it, complaining that they couldn't get a reservation. When 3 or 4 people in your circle mention the same thing, you know it's a big deal. The previous owner, Carter Hayes' father, had once bragged to him about his son's little entrepreneurial venture. Now, he was silent on the matter. Richard had almost laughed in his face when he found out the restaurant hadn't been bought for Stella, but for her boyfriend. My son might be a screw-up, he'd imagine the man thinking, but your daughter is giving away the family fortune. Now, though, people were congratulating Mr. Hayes on his son's genius restaurant, and the man could only smile weakly, unable to admit he couldn't even get a table there himself. Richard couldn't laugh anymore either. Back in the kitchen, Leo fried everyone's creations. They tasted even better for having been made by their own hands. Even Alex's dense dough sticks were delicious. But Leo's were on another level. Perfectly crispy, fragrant, and just sweet enough. You couldn't eat just one. As she happily crunched on a twist, Jessica felt a familiar twinge of guilt. She was definitely going to gain weight this semester. She could already hear her parents worrying about how much they'd have to save up for her wedding. In her hometown, the pressure on the bride's family to provide an extravagant wedding was immense, a heavy burden that weighed on her parents. Without it, they feared she would be looked down upon. The going rate was already well into 6 figures. Fewer and fewer people watched broadcast television anymore. Many young people didn't even buy a TV when they set up their first home, making do with laptops. Those who did were often shocked to discover that you had to pay a monthly fee for cable. It was a matter of principle. They'd happily drop $100 on a whim, but a $12 shipping fee was a deal breaker. A new TV was one thing, but a recurring monthly charge? No, thanks. So, when a new show premiered, its ratings were bound to be low. It wasn't always a reflection of quality. The audience just wasn't there anymore. A good show could still find life later through streaming rights and get dissected into a million clips on TikTok and YouTube. True gold wouldn't stay buried for long. Still, most people expected The Chancellor's Gambit to be just another forgettable period drama. In an age of information overload, where any story could be summarized in a 2-minute recap video, it felt like nothing could truly capture the collective imagination anymore. But then the show began. The camera panned slowly up a grand stone staircase, revealing a solemn imperial court. There were faint traces of blood on the dais, a stark contrast to the majestic pillars and towering gates. The story unfolded from there. The cinematography was stunning, each frame composed with the care of a feature film. The actors looked and sounded natural, their costumes authentic, their dialogue unforced. It felt less like a drama and more like someone had pulled back a curtain on a moment in history. The audience for network television was mostly middle-aged and older now, a demographic that had been burned by a string of bizarre, low-quality productions. But tonight, this show was a breath of fresh air. It was comfortable, compelling, and intelligent. The story was told from the perspective of a lively and charming young lady from a powerful family, a world of stately elegance mixed with the hushed gossip of servants. Every character, no matter how small, felt alive. As evening breezes drifted through open windows across the country, hands that had been reaching for the remote control paused, then settled. People who had just been flipping through channels found themselves watching, and before they knew it, 2 episodes had flown by, commercials and all. Only after the credits rolled did they stop to check the title, The Chancellor's Gambit. It was a quiet, unassuming premiere, but it had planted a hook. On the same night, director Ian Shaw's rival show, Crown of Thorns, dropped online. He'd skipped the network broadcast, knowing his show's risque content. Dashing scholars, generals, and emperors who all seemed to have an aversion to properly tying their robes would never pass the censors. The actors, to their credit, were chiseled to perfection. Individually, every promotional still was a work of art, but stringing them together was another story. It was like a student trying to write an essay by stuffing it full of big words without any coherent thought. The result was a beautiful, glittering, incomprehensible mess. Shaw's philosophy was that in the age of Instagram, visuals were everything. No one cared if the food at a trendy restaurant was any good, as long as it was photogenic. He just needed the show to be a trending topic for a week or two. With a cast of A-listers and hot new idols, how could it not be? His show premiered a couple of hours after The Chancellor's Gambit finished, targeting the late-night streaming crowd. The reaction was immediate, explosive, and overwhelmingly negative. By the time I realized what I was watching, it was too late. Ian Shaw should be paying for my therapy after this. My eyes. I was burning incense when I put this on, and a ghost literally popped out of the ground to yell at me for an hour. This show is like projectile vomit. I was just scrolling past and got covered in it. I couldn't look away. I just had to see how much worse it could possibly get. Thank God for the commercials. I needed a minute to recover. I watched this without headphones, and now my family is disowning me. First time in my life, I've thought of an ad break as a light in the darkness. Is Director Shaw's ancestral tomb haunted or something? After watching this, I just wanted to go downstairs and buy a pack of cigarettes, but I couldn't be bothered to take the stairs or the elevator. Sometime after midnight, Ian Shaw made the mistake of reading the comments. His blood pressure shot up to 220. It's fine, he told himself. Hate watching is still watching. Black mark fame is still fame. But his face was pale as he called for his wife, 40 years his junior, to find his medication. She couldn't find the bottle that was sitting right on the nightstand. An hour later, an ambulance took him to the hospital, generating yet another trending topic. His investors assumed it was just another one of his publicity stunts. Leo and his friends were oblivious to the drama. The restaurant was humming along, a well-oiled machine now. They had fallen into a comfortable rhythm, able to handle the dinner rush, and still find time to study. They all knew this was just a temporary chapter in their lives, which allowed them to enjoy it without the weight of it being their entire future. They were just kids working a job, and that perspective kept their spirits high. Tonight, Leo made a perfectly steamed fish and started thinking about adding braised pork belly with preserved greens to the menu. He asked Chef Wu to show him the basics, marveling at how quickly he picked it up now. His mind felt sharper, his hands more capable. The service was impeccable. Hannah and Alex handled the front of house. Jessica had trained the waitstaff to perfection, and the whole operation ran with a quiet efficiency that impressed their high-end clientele. One guest in a wheelchair was guided to his table so seamlessly it was as if the restaurant had been designed just for him. The food was delicious, the atmosphere was intimate, and the service was better than at most Michelin-starred restaurants. The restaurant's reputation was officially solidified. After their shift, everyone headed back to the dorm. Jordan remembered it was the premiere of The Chancellor's Gambit and immediately set up the projector he'd borrowed. He'd been an extra on the set for a day and was curious to see how it turned out. They watched, intending only to catch Leo's scenes, but the first 2 episodes flew by. Before they knew it, the dorm lights flickered for curfew, and they were scrambling to get ready for bed. "Your mom is amazing," Leo said, genuinely impressed. "It looks so different on set. The final version is beautiful, like a gentle, flowing river." "It's really good," Alex agreed. "If it stays like this, it's going to be a massive hit. I'm telling my brother to sponsor it," Jordan declared. "Get in early." Sean, the aspiring filmmaker, was the most affected. He'd been feeling proud of his own progress lately, but watching Penelope's work was a humbling, inspiring experience. Leo skipped his morning run, opting instead to lie in bed and text Stella. Stella, you need to send more of that hot sauce to my parents. Leo? Stella, my mom texted me last night. Her exact words were, "You leaky little jacket, your father can't eat, and he's too proud to ask for more hot sauce." Leo had a laugh. He'd met Victoria Vance, but not her husband. The image of the powerful Richard Vance pouting like a picky toddler was surprisingly endearing. With no one to do a breakfast run, the dorm mates scavenged from Jordan's snack hoard. A mix of milk, yogurt, apples, crackers, chips, and jerky got them through the morning. It was raining hard outside, a steady drumming against the window pane that made Jordan's decision to go back to sleep seem like the smartest choice of all. Alex, ever diligent, headed out to work on the food festival. Sean, inspired by the previous night's viewing, pulled on a raincoat and went out to film, determined to capture the unique mood of the campus in the rain. The downpour meant Leo and Stella's planned run was canceled, so he decided to head to the art studio with Sean. As they walked across the quad, the system's voice suddenly echoed in his mind. Detected that host's Skillshare partner, Sean Riley, has achieved a breakthrough in photography. He has mastered the time flow shooting method. Photography skill has been upgraded to intermediate level 3. A feedback bonus has been granted to host. Host photography skill has been upgraded to advanced level 4, specializing in capturing story and a sense of time. Leo glanced back at Sean, who was crouched under an awning, completely absorbed in framing a shot of rain dripping from a leaf. Damn, he really is working hard. The wind whipped the rain sideways, and by the time they reached the studio, Leo's pant legs were soaked. He cranked up the heat, and as the room warmed, the windows fogged over, blurring the swaying, rain-drenched trees outside. He settled in to study, planning to alternate between his books and a new painting. Sean quietly set up his equipment, a new sense of purpose in his movements. He'd grasped something last night, an instinct he couldn't put into words, but he could feel it in the way he saw the world through his lens. The rain meant Penelope Hayes slept in, too. She was woken by her phone ringing. It was an old friend from the network. "Penny, the overnights are in." The voice crackled with excitement. 439%. You're on track to break this year's record. Penelope sat up, fumbling for her glasses. It took a moment for the number to register. Over 1% on the first night? For a slow burn drama like hers? The rest of the series was even better. This was it. This was going to be big. She sprang out of bed, a wide grin on her face. By the time she finished washing up, Professor Hoffman had breakfast waiting. Pumpkin porridge, pan-fried dumplings, steamed greens, and a hard-boiled egg. "I compiled the best online reviews for you," he said, handing her a tablet. "Made a little PowerPoint you can watch while you eat." "Thank you, Luke," she said, beaming. "I had my friend pick you up a humidified box of Cohibas." Professor Hoffman's smile nearly split his face. A box like that cost a fortune. "Thanks, honey," he said, his voice giddy. "Let me peel your egg. It's a little hot." Professor Hoffman's grin was wider than an assault rifle was long. He was as happy as a 5-year-old boy. Penelope chuckled. It wasn't that they couldn't afford nice things, but there was a special joy he took in gifts from her. Men, she'd found, were simple creatures. If he liked video games, you bought him a console. If he liked fishing, you bought a house on a river and stocked it with fish. If he liked cigars, you built him a humidor. He was so busy enjoying himself at home, he never had any desire to go elsewhere. Of course, it wasn't a one-way street. Luke provided immense emotional value. He listened patiently to her rants, offered comfort without trying to solve her problems, and charmed all her friends. He understood that sometimes a woman just needed to talk things out to find her own solution through the act of speaking. After their quiet, happy breakfast, Penelope left for the studio. Luke, who had no classes that morning, went to visit Judge Cole, bringing with him the next episode of the show. Well, the judge chuckled. "I suppose at my level, I'm only privileged enough to see one episode ahead." He had watched the premiere the night before and had been thoroughly enjoying it when his caretaker insisted it was time for bed. He and Luke settled in to watch. "Penny's really improved over the years," the judge commented. 10 years to sharpen one sword. Excellent work. Even for someone who didn't watch period dramas, the quality was undeniable. It captured a sense of prosperous, everyday life that was deeply satisfying. They were halfway through the 3rd episode when a familiar face appeared on screen. The judge sat up straighter. "Well, I'll be. The kid is a natural. The whole screen just lights up when he's on. I almost didn't recognize him. Your Penny has a great eye. Did she cast him on the spot?" It was true. The 3rd episode introduced the female lead's doomed first love, her white moonlight. through the magic of editing and a last-minute script revision, prompted by an enthusiastic new investor and a screenwriter who had fallen in love with the actor's dailies. The role had been expanded. Leo had no formal training. He had no illusions about his looks. He'd taken the part simply to get an internship credit through a professor's connection. Combined with the immersive acting buff, he had become the character, a carefree, kind-hearted young master who had never known hardship. His handsomeness wasn't the sharp, aggressive kind of today's idols. It was gentle, warm. That was what Penelope had seen in him from the start. She had briefly considered Cave for the role. His headshots were breathtakingly beautiful, but she worried that a face that perfect would be a distraction. And his acting was all performance, no substance. She'd worked with trainees like him before. They were thin-skinned and came with armies of toxic fans ready to attack her online for the slightest criticism. She'd already been flamed just for not casting him. It wasn't worth the headache. Working with her husband's student was like teaching her own kid, much simpler. Her instincts had been right. The final result was exactly what she had hoped for. She secretly couldn't wait for the episode where his character died. If there were a national tally for tear-jerking, she was about to become the champion. Even she, a director with a heart of stone, had cried watching the final cut. The network censors who reviewed it had all been red-eyed. The producer was even more ecstatic than she was. "Penny, I told you we'd have a hit," he crowed, slapping her on the back. "Remember when we gave out lottery tickets to the crew and someone won? It was a good omen from the start." The other actors in the show were also starting to realize something had shifted. Their phones were buzzing more than usual. In today's gig-based industry, an actor's part in a project was often just one block in a packed schedule. They'd shoot their scenes and move on to the next job. But Penelope, though seen by some as a relic from a bygone era, had a reputation. She didn't compromise, she didn't chase trends, and she didn't bow to capital. She picked her actors carefully, knowing a bad apple could poison the whole project. And now, that dedication was paying off. Leo was at the ranch to check on Monarch, see how the horse was doing, and ask the handlers if they'd noticed anything unusual over the past couple of days. One of the younger hands, a guy named Luke, had called Dylan Sloan, and word had gotten out to the rest of the staff. Most of the original crew had decided to head back home. This gig was basically a business trip with a per diem, and their families were elsewhere. Dylan hadn't really thought it through at first, just wanted to bring in experienced hands to get things up and running quickly, but experienced people usually had roots. Luke, however, was young and single. For him, a job was a job, and he could work anywhere. Plus, he'd been taking care of Monarch for a long time and had grown attached. He didn't want to leave him. With his resume, he could find another job in a heartbeat. He and Monarch practically lived on the same schedule, not eating from the same trough or sleeping in the same stall, of course, but their routines were synchronized. He was feeling a little jealous at the moment. He thought he was Monarch's closest human, but it was clearly the boss. Oh well, Monarch was so smart, he barely seemed like a horse. Sometimes Luke felt the horse had more emotional intelligence than he did. Other than eating a little slower, he's been fine, Luke reported. It poured last night, but he was calm all day yesterday, which is weird. He usually gets antsy when the weather's about to turn, like he can feel it in his bones or something. But yesterday, he was totally stable. Leo saw that Monarch looked healthy and told Luke to continue with the medicated feed at the same dosage. Outside, the rain had stopped. The dormant winter grass looked refreshed, greener than before. Even when the grass in this part of the country turned brown for the winter, it wasn't a dry, dead brown. It was thick and dense like a plush carpet. After a rain, your boots would squelch with every step, and any dip in the ground held a small puddle. After checking on Monarch, Leo went to see the other horses. Including Monarch, there were now 18 horses on the ranch. Originally, there had been over 20, but by the time Dylan took over, only 17 remained. Compared to Monarch, they were nothing special, but they were still beautiful animals. The previous owner, Carter Hayes, had bought them thinking they were purebreds. Dylan said he'd almost certainly been scammed. He'd paid over 50 grand a head for them, when in reality, a decent colt goes for 5 to 8,000, and a trained adult for maybe 10 or 20. Of course, once you start talking about pedigrees and racing lineage, the prices skyrocket. 50 or 100 grand is just the starting point. It wasn't just a matter of doubling the price. It was a whole different league, as Monarch's own value proved. Dylan had been scammed plenty of times himself, so he knew exactly what was going on the moment he saw Carter's ranch. He'd paid a lot more for his lessons. As for their supposed pedigree, Carter had likely been fed a line. They weren't from any noble lineage. They were just pretty. It was like a beginner photographer who gets obsessed with buying a massive, flashy telephoto lens. It looks impressive, but it's impractical for daily use, and most pros rarely touch one. But almost every amateur can't resist buying one, only to let it gather dust once they actually learn how to shoot. Carter had bought the equine equivalent of that flashy, useless lens. And now, thanks to his neglect, the horses were underfed and their coats were dull. Leo tried to lead Monarch over to the other horses, but Monarch was having none of it. He held his head high, refusing to go near them. Spoiled by capital, Monarch looked down on his own kind, sniffing at their muddled scents. Having lived in a luxury stable, he was probably put off by the smell of this place, a mix of manure and feed. He'd been coddled for so long he'd become picky. Leo had to go over by himself. He did a quick walkthrough. The stalls were clean, and the feeding conditions seemed decent. For a normal stable, it was perfectly fine. Not every horse could get the Monarch treatment. He was basically the panda of the equine world, living in a climate-controlled room. These horses were lucky to have a roof over their heads. They all looked a bit frail, so Leo decided to add some of the herbal supplements to their feed as well, just a smaller dose as a daily dietary boost. He gave the task to Luke. Then, Leo decided to take Monarch out for a ride to stretch his legs. Sean, who loved the feel of the world after a rain, grabbed a camera, picked a horse, and followed them. The ground was a little damp, but the air was exceptionally clean. Monarch was happy, too. The rain stopping was cause for celebration, and he was ready to take his cub out for a romp. Back at school, Sean had felt his photography skills improving, but he hadn't had a vast, open space to truly test them. Out here on the plains, using his camera suddenly felt incredibly intuitive. He could capture the feeling of Monarch's gallop in a way that felt more real than ever before. The curve of his legs, the height of his stride, the point of impact. The angle had an immersive quality. Monarch was just happy to be out in the good weather, but as he ran, he suddenly felt lighter on his feet. For a while now, there had been a nagging feeling in his leg joints, something stuck like a piece of spinach in your teeth. He could still run, but it was always uncomfortable. Today, it felt like someone had finally flossed it out. He felt inexplicably relieved. Monarch ran with joy, picking up speed. Sean couldn't keep up, but as a photographer, he didn't have to. With his zoom lens, he could just wait and capture the shot. Leo rode with him for a while, and Sean filmed for just as long. He decided he would post a video of Leo riding today. The post-rain air was so pure that both man and horse looked stunning, as if a clarity filter had been applied to the world, and he had captured the sense of speed. How do you film something to make it look fast? You'd think it was simple, just point and shoot. But it's not. You can film a car speeding by, but without a frame of reference, the velocity is lost. The eye can be deceived, but Sean's lens had captured that feeling of a dead sprint, something he couldn't do before. He used the wind, the landscape, the ripples on a nearby lake, the swaying of the grass. All of it came together to emphasize the speed. The shot was incredibly fluid, and this time he understood why. He felt like he was finally touching the core of his craft. Riding Monarch was exhilarating for Leo. He let out a wave of pin-up emotion. No wonder guys love driving. This feeling of command and freedom was incredible. All the frustration drained out of him, replaced by pure joy. Monarch was happy, too. Having his cub around seemed to make his body feel better. He didn't understand why, of course, but he could feel the difference. His equine logic was simple. Cub arrives, rain stops equals good. Cub arrives, legs feel better equals good. Therefore, cub equals good. This was a cub that brought him good luck. Leo didn't let him run for too long. Monarch was still recovering, so a little exercise was enough. He slowed him to a walk and headed back. When Leo said it was time to go, Monarch seemed to understand. He gently bit Leo's bag, refusing to let him leave, and nudged him with his head, practically begging. If Sean hadn't been filming it, no one would have believed it. Finally, after Leo promised to come back in a couple of days, Monarch relented. He let go, nuzzling Leo's face with a reluctant, warm snort. Leo wiped his cheek. If I didn't know he was a stud, I'd think my charm worked on all species. On the way back, mister. Lou drove his young boss home in the Bentley. The headlights of the Bentayga were stunning, glittering like cut crystal even when they were off. It was a car that screamed young money, the sporty model practically designed for the sons of billionaires. The self-made rich wouldn't dare buy one. They believed in spending money wisely on things that projected an image of serious business. They buy a sedan for meetings, not an SUV. The Bentley's power delivery was incredibly smooth, the gear shifts seamless. The steering was light, and the suspension was so comfortable that going over a speed bump felt like gliding over a ripple in a pond. Your body didn't bounce. It swayed gently, softly. You could be sipping champagne in the back while taking a sharp turn at 50 miles an hour and not spill a drop. On the highway, even at speeds that would get your license revoked, the cabin was so quiet you could hear the faint ticking of a Patek Philippe on your wrist. Mr. Lou was in heaven. He wondered if Mr. Vance had seen his latest report. Maybe a Rolls-Royce Culinary would be next? But the two cars felt a bit redundant. Then again, for a guy, there's no such thing as a redundant car, just different brands. Same way for a girl, there's no such thing as a redundant handbag, just different styles and colors. Suddenly, he felt a little disappointed in his own boss, Mr. Vance. Someone else had beaten him to the punch by giving Leo a Bentley. Now he was stuck driving it. Mr. Lou, what were you even thinking? Sean, sitting in the passenger seat, felt like he was in a dream. The interior was gorgeous, a blend of classical aesthetics and pure, unadulterated wealth. From a photographer's perspective, it was stunning. Every detail was picture perfect. Not that he would focus on these things. He'd taken a few videos for stock footage, but he knew that if you had to rely on a man's car, his house, or his watch to prove his worth, then that worth was hollow. It meant you weren't unique. Those things could have a new owner tomorrow. He thought about all the online sellers who photographed luxury watches against the steering wheels of their fancy cars. The lighting inside a car could make a good watch look incredible. If you shot it inside a Bentley, you could probably make a decent piece look like a museum-grade masterpiece. The unspoken message was clear. I drive a luxury car, so I'm not going to scam you over a few bucks. Of course, a lot of those cars were probably rented. Whatever emotion a customer was looking for, a seller could create it. Sometimes, you weren't selling a product. You were selling a feeling. Right now, Mr. Lou was feeling fantastic. It was hard not to when you were driving a car like this. He was also a professional. This was work time, so of course he was driving the boss's car. It was spacious and comfortable. The ride was so quiet that Leo took the opportunity to give Mr. Lou his instructions. He asked him to focus on the ranch for the time being, hire and train the necessary staff, oversee the cleanup, and make sure the horses were well cared for. They wouldn't be open to the public for a while, which gave them time to get everything in order. As for Mr. Lou's salary, Leo had asked Stella. She'd said her father paid him very well, but if needed, Leo could add a bonus. Assistants in Mr. Vance's company were essentially executives in training, all-rounders. Richard Vance was generous with people like that. If they performed well, he'd set them up with cars, houses, even help with their spouse's job, their kids' schooling, and their parents' medical care. Headhunters were always trying to poach these talented individuals with higher salaries, but they rarely left. Working for Mr. Vance meant having your entire life taken care of. As long as you were capable and worked hard, you had no worries. It was a bit like an old-fashioned system of family retainers. Mr. Vance didn't offer the highest salary in the industry, but the benefits were unbeatable. As someone who was still, essentially, an employee himself, Leo had a long way to go. He felt awkward talking about money. When it came to these things, he never knew what to do. As a boss, he lacked boundaries with his employees. He was friendly, but not authoritative. The projects he was currently running, the TikTok account and the private kitchen, were with his best friends, so the issue hadn't come up yet. They knew him too well. Leo recognized this about himself, but he wasn't a particularly ambitious or social person. Even if he tried to learn, some things were hard to change. There was no need to force it. He should stick to what he was good at. He laid out his requirements for Mr. Lou. As a college student, he could at least articulate his needs clearly. That was enough for now. As for motivating his staff and keeping them productive, Leo figured he'd leave that to Stella. She seemed to have a better handle on that sort of thing. Even at the private kitchen, though he was the owner, the staff seemed to respect Stella more. Leo wasn't the least bit jealous. He respected her too, especially in private. The only issue was his stamina. After round 3, he was usually exhausted enough to pass out instantly, while Stella could still get up, stretch, shower, change, and then go to sleep looking perfect. It always made him wonder if he wasn't trying hard enough. Back at school, they went straight to the private kitchen. Leo headed to work. He liked doing things, not managing them. When you're doing something, you just focus and get it done. Managing felt too random. You couldn't control whether others did a good job, and that made him anxious. He might not be able to manage others, but he could manage himself. Leo got changed and happily started making pastries. He was making fried dough twists again. Yesterday's batch had been a success. He'd mailed some out, the staff had eaten some, and the guests who tried them had all loved them. Some even wanted to buy them to take home, but he hadn't set a price on the first day. It was hard to price something like that. If it was too cheap, it was too much work for too little return. Too expensive, and it felt wrong. Better to just give them away as a complimentary treat. He was back early today, so he decided to make a bigger batch and send some to his professors. He texted Miss Miller to ask if she preferred sweet or savory. She was in the middle of a high-level inspection on campus, spinning like a top. In the afternoon, Leo finished making the dough twists. He mailed some home to his grandparents on both sides. For his Aunt Sky and Uncle Clay, he sent tea. His aunt and uncle were tea drinkers. His uncle wasn't, but his Aunt Melinda was all about appearances, and sending tea was classier than sending pastries. Leo had also seen Mr. Mikami's TikTok post. With his endorsement, combined with the buzz from other influential figures in the tea world, the orders were pouring in. Joyrin told him sales were through the roof, especially international exports. Mr. Mikami himself had ordered 20 pounds. The man was clearly well off. They didn't give him a discount, but they did offer free shipping. Professor Reed and Dylan Sloan had also placed large orders. The tea, without any major marketing campaign, was quietly becoming a status symbol among the academic and business elite. When Joy called him, her voice was practically singing. When your luck turns, there's no stopping it. As a 20% partner, Leo was looking at a payout of over $100,000 this month. Joy didn't mind paying him. Without his connections, the tea would have gone nowhere, no matter how beautiful the packaging. He had earned it. The private kitchen was also turning a profit, but after paying salaries and rent, there wasn't much left. Leo hadn't expected to make money right away. Breaking even was a win. The ranch wasn't even open yet and was just a money pit. Unless he sold it, which would be a terrible deal right now, it was a fixed asset that required constant investment. So, the money from Joy would come in one hand and go right back out the other to cover the ranch's expenses. Monarch had some income from his stud fees, but Dylan was reluctant to use him purely for breeding. Too many pairings would devalue him, so Monarch's partners were carefully selected. His annual workload was light, just a few times a year. It was an easy life, with the only downside being that he didn't get to choose his own dates. When he was just looking for a job, Leo thought 10 or 20,000 a month would be more than enough. But when you have assets, your expenses multiply. You realize that no matter how much you make, it's never enough. There's always something that needs money. Leo was feeling that now. The moment Joy told him about the income, he already knew where it was going. He'd studied accounting, but dealing with money still felt complicated. No wonder powerful people had assistants. He heard what Stella's father paid Mr. Lou. For now, he couldn't afford that. He'd wait until he was a little more enlightened. He spent the afternoon happily making dough twists. Today he made a savory batch, and they were delicious, not greasy at all. He had both flavors delivered to Professor Hoffman and Judge Cole. The three of them had a group chat, and Professor Hoffman had mentioned that he and the judge had been watching a show that morning and were praising Leo's performance. Leo felt like they were making fun of him. Still, he sent them the pastries, along with some of the chicken cake he'd sent to Director Cole before. Unconsciously, his network had grown quite rich. Time flew when he was busy, and before he knew it, night had fallen. When Leo emerged from the kitchen, he saw a sight that nearly made his heart stop. On the large sofa in the main dining area, the one with the best view, Stella's favorite, sat Stella herself. To her right was Jessica Monroe, and to her left, looking impossibly well-developed for her age, was Paige Kennedy. And Moose, Paige's dog, was lying peacefully at their feet, his long body stretched out just enough to touch the toes of all three women. Good boy. Paige knew Leo had a girlfriend, and she knew her aunt and uncle had basically adopted him as a godson. At first, she thought it was just a thank you for saving her cousin, but now her aunt was saying her uncle wanted to take Leo on as his final apprentice, the kind you pass everything down to, even splitting the inheritance. So, she really had no chance. She'd visited before, but had never run into them. Today, she saw the two beautiful upperclassmen. Without even thinking, Paige decided the one with the short hair and tall frame had to be the girlfriend. She made the judgment based on her chest. Paige knew her own chest was huge, and Leo didn't like that. Even when she tried to downplay it, she was still a C+. The long-haired girl wasn't small either, at least a B+. But the short-haired one was a B, maybe an A+ at most. She remembered how she deliberately tried to seduce him, pressing her chest flat against the sofa, and he, while curious enough to sneak a peek, had made no further moves. The guy probably didn't like big chests. He did, however, like looking at feet and legs. And the short-haired girl, while not busty, had long, straight legs and beautiful hands with slender, pale fingers. Her feet had to be pretty too, and Leo was a coward who needed someone to keep him in line. This short-haired girl was so cool, so handsome. Seeing her, Paige could almost forgive Leo for getting a girlfriend. Ugh, this girl was so gorgeous. Paige herself wanted to get close to her. The kind of beautiful that could turn a girl straight. When she wasn't obsessing over Leo, Paige was actually quite sweet and lively. She had natural emotional intelligence, even if she lacked common sense. She saw Stella and immediately chirped, "Hi, sis," acting as adorable as possible. Moose was also on his best behavior. He had to be. Paige would smack him on the head otherwise. His whole body was fluffy, but his head was getting bald. Stella was sharp. The moment she saw Moose, she knew who this was. The freshman who had a crush on Leo. Paige, who was now technically his cousin. She seemed sweet and a little ditzy, utterly guileless. She answered any question you asked, and even the ones you didn't. Jessica looked at Paige, listened to her sugary sweet way of talking, and could tell this was a girl who had never known hardship. She didn't even need to be told. 8 out of every 9 words out of Paige's mouth were Leo. Her feelings were written all over her face, her smile as sweet as candy. Jessica envied that kind of innocent, open-heartedness. Even if she didn't get what she wanted, her life was probably happy, with very few worries. When Leo came out, he didn't know where to sit. The sofa was full. On Stella's lap, he envied Moose, who got to lie at their feet and get petted by everyone. Even his greeting was awkward. Just then, a customer arrived. Hannah-chan went to greet them, leading in Ms. Miller, who was dressed in a black mermaid skirt and a form-fitting white crewneck sweater, a black coat draped over her arm. The university president was hosting a dinner tonight, and she was here to make sure everything was in order. And then she saw the scene of harmonious sisterhood. Leo greeted his teacher. The girls, all students, stood up politely to greet her as well. Ms. Miller smiled. Quite a crowd. It was still early. She checked the private room arrangements, gave a few instructions to Hannah and Leo, and then came over to sit and chat for a moment. Hannah, as a full-time employee, couldn't linger and went back to attending to other guests. A person's aura can change. The old Ms. Miller was gentle, the kind of person who seemed like she could forgive any mistake you made. She always wore simple slacks, a solid-colored t-shirt, and her hair in a low ponytail. The woman standing here, now, had the sharp efficiency of a career professional. Her smile was crisp and bright. Looking back to his freshman and sophomore years, Leo realized Ms. Miller had always had that trait. She spoke decisively and could be stern when she needed to be. You couldn't manage a bunch of college kids without it. But back then, it felt like she lacked career ambition, happy to just live in the moment. The Ms. Miller of today was serious and direct, her posture and actions reminiscent of her aunt, President Grant. In front of the young women, she hid it well, not giving Leo so much as an extra glance. He remembered a scene from a spy movie where they were trying to identify a mole. At an outdoor luncheon, an old man collecting scraps was the suspect, but the person who made a point of not looking at the old man was also deemed suspicious. When it came to these things, women had a sensitivity that rivaled Sherlock Holmes. A built-in radar. It wasn't just Ms. Miller who had changed. Jessica had, too. Before, she always seemed to be putting on a brave face, a forced maturity that came with a constant, subtle frown, as if she felt life had dealt her a bad hand. Now, it was as if she had shed that armor. She was like a flower blooming on a thorny cactus, a prickly shell protecting soft, pure white petals. The spotlight from the ceiling hit her shoulders, which were draped in a small, lavender cashmere scarf. She just smiled, her long black hair falling around her like a detached, personal umbrella. She was like a girl strolling on a rainy afternoon, walking so slowly that the light splashes from the puddles barely dampened the hem of her dress. Stella's aura was one of innate command. No matter where she went, she seemed to naturally occupy the seat of honor. If a waiter came to the table for the check, they would instinctively approach her, assuming she was the one with the means to pay. A group of women is a drama in itself. When Carter Hayes, the former owner, walked in and saw this scene, a dragon of envy roared in his heart. Were all the beautiful students and faculty of the entire university gathered here? And this was what Leo called focusing on his career. He was filled with indignation and self-pity. But today he was here to make peace. Thinking back on it, there was no reason for them to be enemies. There was no deep-seated hatred. Things had just spiraled. His private kitchen was gone. He'd heard his horse ranch had been bought by some big shot from the capital as a gift for Leo, and the Bentley Bentayga he had on order, Saab, was now parked right outside, also for Leo. He had given up everything he could, only to end up on bad terms with the guy. It made no sense. After the last incident, he thought it was over. But then this new private kitchen became famous, and his father had given him another brutal lecture. When his dad found out he'd also transferred the deed to the ranch, he nearly choked on his own rage. It was easy to sell off land you never worked for. Carter had been grounded and had his credit cards frozen. It was only then that he finally came to his senses. He wasn't an idiot, just not particularly bright, and after a few weeks of reflection, he understood. He had come to apologize, but seeing Leo surrounded by beauties still filled him with envy and resentment. This was the life of a boss that he had envisioned for himself. And yet, Leo just sat there looking like a good little student. Puffed. And how were those girls not at each other's throats? Weren't women supposed to be jealous? How could they all get along so peacefully? PFFT, PFFT, PFFT. No matter how much he seethed internally, he had to be polite. Leo, sensing the faint, charged atmosphere of a romantic battlefield, felt a surge of gratitude at Carter's arrival. It was an escape. He immediately ran over to greet him. "Carter, good to see you." Carter had brought his uncle, who was even more handsome than him and impeccably dressed, exuding an air of quiet wealth. Following Carter's lead, Leo greeted him. "Hello, sir." Seeing Leo greet him so warmly, with no hint of their past conflict, Carter felt a pang of shame. He'd been judging the man by his own petty standards, internally complaining about him just moments ago, only to be met with such sincere enthusiasm. He could tell it was genuine, not fake politeness. His guilt deepened. Carter's uncle, Charles Hayes, studied the young man who had bested his nephew. He looked even younger than Carter, but he had a gentle temperament, spoke articulately, and had a pleasant voice. He was an instantly likable kid. Charles compared the restaurant now to when his nephew had run it. There were fewer staff, but the layout was cleaner, more minimalist, with no grimy corners. The remaining staff moved with purpose. When his nephew first opened the place, Charles had come to show support. He appreciated young people trying to start businesses. Even though there was a saying, a rich kid can't eat or drink their fortune away, but they can sure lose it on a startup. You had to let them try. If they couldn't even handle that, how could they manage the family business? Back then, he thought his nephew had done a decent job. But looking back, it felt like his nephew had been playing house, and his praise had been indulgent. This time was different. The young woman at the front desk, though a bit chubby, was composed and spoke at a measured pace that was easy on the ears. She greeted them by name, the elder and younger Mr. Hayes, which gave the place a first-class feel, like being personally addressed by a flight attendant. It made you feel like an honored guest. It was his first time back since the transfer, and it felt more welcoming than ever. The dining room wasn't chaotic or empty. It was just right. And most importantly for a restaurant, the moment you walked in, you were hit by the fragrant aroma of food. It made you hungry. It made you want to eat. Leo had fled in terror. He was genuinely spooked. Before the system's notification, he had actually thought Carter's uncle seemed like a nice guy, much like his own Uncle Clay. Handsome, charming, a brilliant academic. They'd been close when Leo was a kid. His uncle would come up with the plans, and Leo would get the punishments. It was a great relationship. But this uncle was different. Not all uncles were the same. Apparently, someone having a high affection for you didn't always mean they liked you platonically. It could mean they liked you. Fortunately, after he escaped the private room, the four-woman battlefield in the main dining hall had also dispersed. More customers were arriving. Ms. Miller had gone out to greet the president and her guests. In the world of academia and bureaucracy, there was an art to greetings. A few extra steps of a welcoming jog could mean a few big steps up the career ladder. Jessica had gone back to work, treating it like her part-time job. Working kept her mind off things and gave her a sense of peace. She felt she still had room to improve, not just compared to Stella, whose background and opportunities were different, but even compared to Hannah-chun. They were both from ordinary families, and Jessica had always thought of herself as meticulous, but Hannah was even more thorough and far bolder. When Hannah had a suggestion, she presented it confidently, not just pointing out a problem, but offering a solution. Her thinking was incredibly clear, her actions decisive. She was also supremely self-confident. She was chubby and didn't fit conventional beauty standards, but she radiated an unshakable confidence, full of energy every day. Seeing her made you feel like her health bar was maxed out, with zero internal conflict. Jessica felt she was only optimistic on the surface, constantly battling herself inside. She liked working with Hannah. She was learning and growing just by being around her. Now, only Stella and Paige were left on the sofa. Paige, with an expression of pure, blissful ignorance, was happily munching on a dough twist, her body curled up like a happy pretzel. She had only just met Stella, but she was already leaning against her. Stella, for her part, seemed to adore Moose. She ignored the food and was completely focused on kneading the dog's neck. Moose wore an expression of pure bliss, sitting in a way that gave Stella easy access. Paige was on Stella's left, and Moose was on her right. From a distance, it looked like Stella was petting two giant, fluffy creatures. It was a picture of harmony. Moose's fur was golden. Paige's wavy hair was chestnut. Leo walked over and heard Stella complimenting Paige. "I've seen your live streams. You're adorable. and you have a great voice for selling things. The products you choose are always cute and affordable, too. The praise made Paige's pigtails wag, just like Moose's tail, which was thumping with pleasure. Leo watched Stella effortlessly handle both human and canine, feeling a mix of awe and relief. He quietly tried to slip away. He thanked his lucky stars he'd never done anything inappropriate with the sweet, simple-minded Paige. That girl couldn't keep a secret to save her life. He said a quick hello and then feigned being busy as he retreated to the kitchen. Today was another day for honing his knife skills. Yesterday, Leo had mentioned that the knives weren't great. Today, a brand new set of 5 blades, ranging from large to small, was laid out in his usual spot. Chef Wu had gotten them for him. In the old days of culinary apprenticeships, you had to serve your master like a father before he'd teach you his true skills. Leo's comment had been offhand, but Chef Wu had remembered and found him a new set the very next day. They were excellent. Different fish required different knives. A large blade was clumsy for a small fish, and a small knife was too slow for a large one. Even cutting the head required a specific feel. The old knives had gotten dull. The clean, one-stroke cut of sharp blade was incredibly satisfying. Wearing his Hermes apron, Leo meticulously cleaned a sink full of fish, the fabric splattered with blood and scales. The apron's designers probably never imagined its owner would actually be cooking in it. Sean continued filming. He placed a waterproof phone in the sink, pointing upwards. It was a great angle for a suspenseful shot. You could see the action from below, but the person's face was obscured. The footage was beautiful. Leo's knife work was clean, possessing a kind of deadly grace. But Sean hesitated. He wasn't sure if he could post it. Would it be too graphic, too villainous? Once the fish were prepped and in the steamer, and the culinary tonic ingredients were simmering, Leo's main tasks were done. He stepped outside to brew some of the medicinal herbs. Drawn by his scent, Moose followed him out and sat by his side. It was steamy inside the kitchen, but cool out here under the vast, dark sky. It was a nice feeling. After petting Moose for a bit, Leo asked another staff member to watch the pot while he went upstairs to change. President Grant and her guests had arrived. He should go and say hello. There were strict regulations on entertainment expenses these days, so President Grant was paying out of her own pocket. She had enthusiastically invited her guests, framing it as a visit to a student-run establishment, a chance to see the hard work and diligence of the student body. It was part of her inspection, in a way. Her guests knew she was a reliable, down-to-earth person, so having a meal at a small campus restaurant wasn't breaking any rules. The restaurant's entrance was charming, a quaint old building that appealed to both the older generation's sense of nostalgia and the younger generation's love for vintage aesthetics. But the car parked out front, the one with the wing beyond the hood, was perhaps a bit too flashy. President Grant saw it and raised an eyebrow. Ostentatious. Then, Alex Young, the vice president of the student government, greeted them, dressed in a sharp Zegna suit. One of the officials muttered, "This student is dressed better than I am. It looks like he outranks me." President Grant just sighed. They were shown to a private room. There was no wine, but they were served excellent tea. Jessica brewed the amber bloom pu'er for them from a tin canister. When the president visited, "You brought out the good stuff?" Right pu'er was generally well-liked and easy on the stomach in the evening. Jessica had watched Leo prepare tea before and was a quick study. Whether it tasted perfect was another question, but she had mastered the elegant posture. Hearing the voices of the president and professors outside, Carter Hayes felt a jolt of anxiety. He was so scared a teacher would suddenly appear at his window that he didn't dare leave the room. He thought he saw a bunch of officials when the server brought their food. Wasn't that stern-looking woman with the bob and black-framed glasses their university president? When he was the owner, he couldn't even get a dean to visit. Now, that Leo was the owner, the president herself was here, and hosting other important people, no less. What kind of backroom deal did he pull? It was infuriating. He shrank back, terrified. That's how it was with bad students. You're scared of teachers even when you haven't done anything wrong. He lingered in the private room, not even daring to complain about Leo to his uncle. You don't talk trash about the gods when you're in their temple, just in case they're listening. But the food was undeniably delicious. When the dishes first arrived, they looked very home-style. This is it, Carter thought. This looks like something our housekeeper could make. And you had to book a reservation in advance for this? You couldn't even get one? Was it all just hype? He used to own this place. He knew what it was capable of. He hadn't heard about them hiring anyone new, just the few remaining staff from his time. The head chef had left with him, mainly because his salary was so high that no normal business could afford him. With the chef gone, the food looked average. Carter bit back his criticism. He missed his restaurant. When it was his, he'd never actually sat down and eaten in all the different rooms. Since it was just the two of them, they were in the smallest private room, tucked in a corner. It had a window with a view of a beautiful, tall bird of paradise plant. The room was small but elegant, not cramped. He had furnished it himself. A flicker of pride was quickly extinguished by a wave of resentment. What was there to be proud of? It wasn't his anymore. He finally started eating, his mood still low. He watched as his uncle, normally a man of impeccable manners, ate with astonishing speed. The chopsticks were a blur. Before Carter even registered it, his uncle had polished off half the fish. The portions were for two, and the fish wasn't large. "Uncle, did you skip lunch or something? Are you starving?" Carter asked, bewildered. "Grandma set you up on another blind date yesterday, didn't she? You ran off again? I heard she yelled at Dad for half a day and Grandpa for a full day." His uncle just grunted and kept eating. Seeing his uncle didn't want to talk, Carter dropped it and finally took a bite. His eyes went wide. Holy crap. He immediately dumped his rice onto the remaining fish platter, licked his chopsticks clean, and stirred it all together. Charles Hayes stared at him. "What's the difference between my nephew and a dog? Why get married and have a kid just to raise a walking disaster?" His brother and sister-in-law were constantly at their wits' end. Carter, having finished the fish, saw his uncle mixing the house hot sauce with the vegetables. He tried some himself, then poured the rest of the chili sauce container onto his plate. He turned his meal into a dog's dinner, mixing everything together to claim it before his uncle could. It was a self-preservation tactic honed over years of being tormented by his uncle. By the time they finished, having practically fought over every last scrap, they were both leaning back, rubbing their full stomachs. Carter was humbled. If the food was this good, it was definitely worth the wait list. Sob, his chef could never cook like this. When he found out Leo himself had prepared the meal, he felt utterly defeated. He hadn't stood a chance. When Charles Hayes learned that the incredible meal had been cooked by that young man, his face lit up with delight. Leo was talking with the president when the system's voice echoed in his head. "Congratulations, host. You have successfully charmed gold-tier single male, Charles Hayes. Your efforts have been fruitful. Affection has reached 80. He greatly admires you and is willing to invest in and pay for you. Please continue your efforts and climb to new heights. Affection has surpassed 80. You may add 1 attribute point." Leo's face froze. "No, stay away. You, don't come over here. President, don't go. There's a bad man in the school." He gripped the president's hand tightly, sincerely hoping she wouldn't leave so soon. President Grant just smiled. This student really was interesting. No wonder her niece liked him so much and was always singing his praises. He was quite shy, too, his hand trembling as they shook. At the same time, the system's voice continued. "Congratulations, host. You have successfully charmed gold-tier single woman, Julia Wu Grant. Your efforts have been quite effective. Affection has reached 70. Please continue your efforts and climb to new heights. Julia Wu Grant, 52 years old, single, never married. Net worth, $4.5 million. Property. Erudition, 82. Appearance, 71. It had been a while since Leo had seen someone with such a low net worth. Had he become jaded? Something felt off. The president's assets were less than Ms. Miller's. As the highest-ranking person he knew at the university, shouldn't she be worth more? Her annual salary had to be in the high 6 figures, if not 7. She didn't seem to have any expensive hobbies, and her room and board were likely covered by the university. Her clothes were simple, and she wore almost no jewelry. Her coat looked so old it could have been a historical artifact. Where did all her money go? The system's mechanical voice provided the answer. President Grant's savings were used to build schools in remote northwestern regions. She was previously a teacher in Tibet and sponsored many students. Some of them have become very successful, others less so, but all are better off than their peers back home. Her wealth lies in people. She possesses extensive political resources and connections. Leo fell silent. He had donated money before out of sense of guilt, following Dr. Croft's example, but it wasn't some noble impulse. It was because he felt he could always earn more. But for the president to donate so much, leaving herself with only her home and her salary, that was a level of selflessness few could achieve. Even Leo, with his integrity score of 8, couldn't do it. He squeezed her hand a little harder. President Grant looked at him. "The officials from Kangxi County have contacted the university. They wanted to thank you for your targeted aid. They'd like to send a delegation to meet you and hold a small ceremony. Doing good deeds is worthy of praise and encouragement. You have done well, and the school is proud of you." The praise made Leo even more embarrassed. His small act was being celebrated, while the president's immense contributions went unpublicized. He, a student at her school, was only learning about it now, and from a system, of all things, President Grant saw the sincerity and kindness in the young man before her. He wasn't arrogant when praised, just shy. His affection score ticked up by 2 points. Of course, it could also be that she was just in a good mood tonight. She'd had a pleasant evening with old friends, enjoyed a good meal, and was happy to see her students thriving. She shook his hand firmly and patted his arm. "You are all doing very well," she said, addressing the other students. "You've made our school proud. Keep up the good work. I have no doubt you will all find your place to shine." As they walked her out, her words left them feeling inspired, their hearts full. The rain had stopped, the clouds had parted, and the sky was clear, lit by a bright full moon. After the rush, it was finally time to rest and eat. People who've never worked in the food industry wonder why restaurant workers have stomach problems. It's because their meal times are never regular. During service, you can't eat. You have to serve the customers. But working in a restaurant also meant you met people from all walks of life. You picked up bits of trivia and knowledge you'd never find elsewhere. A few days ago, Leo overheard a customer saying he discovered his personal bank account had a daily transfer limit of $20 million, which he found out when a client's payment over that amount wouldn't go through. Readers in need, you're welcome. Another tidbit wasn't exactly useful, but it was amusing. A customer was telling her friend how she'd left her stainless steel Starbucks tumbler in her car and had accidentally dropped her key fob inside it. When she got back to the car, it said the key wasn't detected, even though she'd been able to unlock the doors. Her male friend then gave her a science lesson on Faraday cages. A cage made of metal can block electromagnetic waves. A car itself is a large Faraday cage, which is why you're generally safe from lightning strikes while inside one. It was a fascinating concept. Maybe that's why leaders always brought thermoses to important meetings. If you were worried about being bugged, you could just dump out the water, dry it, and toss your phone inside. Leo was always overhearing interesting things. But when the conversation turned to, "Honey, you can't keep doing this," he would tune it out. Some things were better left unheard. Superhearing had its downsides, especially when trying to study. Right now, he was looking at his attribute panel, feeling conflicted about where his latest point had come from. Stamina. Definitely stamina. A guy has to be able to protect himself out there. Leo updated his stats. Stamina, 8. 4 plus or minus 1/10. Endurance +1. Speed +1. Strength +1. Agility +1. Recovery. Intellect, 8. 4 plus or minus 1/10. Perception. Memory +1. Logic +1. Language +1. Learning +1. Creativity. Vibe, 8 plus 1/10. Mood, passion, stress response, integrity, 8 minus 1/10. Consciousness, principles, conduct, appearance, 8. 2 plus or minus 1/10. Features, style, physique, +1. Posture, +1. Lifespan, 21/72. 1/110. Current age/projected lifespan/max lifespan. He decided against adding to appearance for now. There were too many predators out there. A little more strength would give him some peace of mind. President Grant and Ms. Miller walked back to their faculty housing, taking the scenic route around the campus lake to aid their digestion. The president rubbed her hand, which felt a little sore. That young man had quite a grip. She'd done farm work in her youth, had even helped build her own living quarters at her first teaching post. She'd hauled stones and mixed mud with the villagers to build a small house next to the classrooms. Her hands were strong, yet today a handshake had made them ache. It was almost funny. When you get older and have lived through so much, looking back is always bittersweet. The past feels like both yesterday and a lifetime ago. From a 2-room schoolhouse to this sprawling 2,000-acre university, she had walked every step of the way. Looking back, she could hardly believe it. At least her body was still healthy enough to keep going. Ms. Miller wasn't thinking that far ahead. She had left a failed marriage behind and was throwing herself into her work. One failure wouldn't define her. The road ahead was long, and there was so much she could still do. Leo and his friends had eaten a lot, so they decided to walk back to the dorms too. This late-night eating habit was not good for the waistline. Back in their room, Jordan eagerly set up the projector. Director Hayes really had something special. He'd been thinking about the show all day. It was available on streaming now, and if you bought a membership, you could watch an extra episode. Once everyone had showered, they gathered to watch. It was a strange feeling, a nostalgic one. It had been years since they had all waited together to watch a show. It felt like childhood, when you had to be in front of the TV at a specific time or you'd miss it. Now, with streaming, you could always catch up later. It was like living in a city. You rarely visit the famous tourist spots because you think you'll always have time. Even Sean pulled his eyes away from his computer, though he was still studying. Penelope Hayes' cinematography was unique, intimate. He watched every frame intently. Finally, Leo's scene came on. At the end of the episode, the credits rolled, a long list of names that most people ignored. But for the actors themselves, seeing their name on that list was a source of pride. It was a record of their journey. Leo's parents happened to be watching the same show. They saw the cast list. The character who vaguely resembled their son, but was much more handsome, was played by an actor named Leo Foster. When that many coincidences align, maybe they aren't coincidences at all. When Leo's scene appeared, his own jaw dropped. Holy crap! He wanted to say something sophisticated, but all that came out was a stunned whisper. He had acted in that scene, but at the time, it had felt chaotic just following the director's instructions, piece by piece like doing homework. He never imagined the final, edited version would look like this. There used to be 2 Leos in the world, the real one and the TikTok one. Now, there were 3. And the third one was in the Chancellor's Gambit, which, after just one day, was already gaining so much traction that people were affectionately calling it the Chancellor's Feast. A good work of art creates a kind of telepathy between the creator and the audience. The show hadn't had a huge marketing push. It had been completely overshadowed by director Shaw's overhyped disaster, Storm and Cloud. A hit TV show is a different kind of famous. It's on another level entirely. Television has the widest and most authoritative audience. Even today, with TikTok stars who have 100 million followers, an actor on a TV show is often seen as more legitimate in the eyes of the public. The entertainment industry is saved. Read the caption on a GIF of Silas's smile. Overnight, the image was everywhere. It seemed to come out of nowhere, but it was flooding every social media feed. He wasn't the most handsome actor, but he had an inexplicable screen presence, a natural charisma. Even Leo's own friends were sharing it. It felt like he had become famous overnight. Penelope Hayes' new show was destined to be a blockbuster, and the first spark was the smile of Silas. A new day. Leo was up early for his run. The rain had finally stopped. The sun was rising cautiously, peeking over the horizon. Tiny white butterflies flitted over the damp grass. The campus was lush and green, and the woods near the art building were alive with a chorus of birdsong. It was early, and the paths were empty, so Leo didn't feel any different. He met Professor Reed and started his warm-up alongside her. The first thing she said to him was, "Leo, my boy, how about an autograph for your professor?" Leo stared at her. "Professor, have you been possessed?" Professor Reed, dressed in a chic purple and white tracksuit and stylish diamond-shaped glasses, swung her arms and slapped her legs in a slow, rhythmic warm-up. "I watched your Professor Hoffman's wife's new show last night," she said breezily. "He recommended it in the faculty group chat, so I gave it a look. It's excellent. The show is good, and your character is wonderful. At this rate, my trend-chasing granddaughter will be desperate for your signature in a few weeks. If you sign one for me now, I can sell it to her at premium." Leo was speechless, spoken like a true math professor. The logic was flawless, the calculation perfect. "Of course, Professor. I'll ask the production team if they have any posters of Silas. I'll sign one and bring it to you." As they warmed up, Leo found himself chatting easily with her. "Professor, I remember one time during my junior year, there was a week left before the end of the month, and I only had $2 to my name. So I used it to buy a lottery ticket. And you know what? A miracle happened." "How much did you win?" Professor Reed asked. "Statistically, that's highly improbable. I created the miracle of surviving a week without spending a dime and not starving to death." Professor Reed looked at the silly boy with affection. The fact that his parents had him was a miracle in itself. Leo felt like he had created another miracle right now, just by being able to joke with Professor Reed. A year ago, the mere sight of her would have made him want to teleport away. Now, he realized that even a brilliant mathematician could be a kind old lady, one who was surprisingly tolerant of his smooth, simple brain as long as he kept her affection score up. After finishing his daily check-in with his favorite NPC professor, Leo went to meet Stella. The fountain was sparkling in the morning light. Everything seemed vibrant after the rain. He waited at the path by the fountain and saw Stella approaching with Jessica. It was funny how boys, when they were dating, usually didn't bring their friends along, but girls often brought their best friend. It was the leading cause of the classic "my best friend stole my boyfriend" tragedy. Too much opportunity. Stella sometimes brought Jessica along, and Leo secretly suspected she was testing him. Who could pass a test like this? Jessica's brow seemed less furrowed these days. The prickly, almost combative vibe she used to have was gone, replaced by a sly, sweet teasing. She and Stella now ganged up on him together. They had both watched the Chancellor's Feast last night. The character of Silas was even more captivating in the show than in the promotional clips. After Stella had fallen asleep, she dreamed she was holding hands with Silas at a coffee shop. Jessica had probably dreamed of him too. She seemed uncharacteristically guilty this morning, with a furtive air about her. Stella was a strong person. She didn't dwell on past conflicts. If you had to be wary of everyone around you, life would be exhausting. She preferred to interact with people openly. It wasn't really a test, but perhaps a subconscious habit picked up from her father. Richard Vance had known his brother was greedy, so he let him get overconfident, then took him down in one fell swoop. The morning sun was slowly burning through the lingering mist. Stella wore military green cargo leggings, the kind with straps and pockets that made it look like she could pull out a dagger at any moment, like a modern-day Lara Croft. Her top was a form-fitting knit sweater. She looked like she could leap onto the roof of the nearest building. She was a warrior, cool, sexy, and utterly captivating. Her hair was up in a messy top knot, with two small blue flower clips holding back stray strands. Leo was mesmerized. He loved her long legs. As she walked toward him, he felt like her footsteps were landing on his heart. Beside her was Jessica, dressed in baggy sweatpants and a loose hoodie. She was so thin that the oversized clothes just draped over her, creating a style of its own. Her makeup was much lighter these days. She used to wear a full face every time he saw her, but after they'd seen her without it when she was sick, she'd stopped. The lighter makeup made her look younger, though her skin was a bit pale without the foundation and blush. She liked running in the baggy hoodie. It made her feel less self-conscious. Leo's eyes were drawn to Stella, but he couldn't help but glance at Jessica. Without the heavy makeup, she was actually quite pretty in a shy girl-next-door kind of way. Early that morning, the officials from Kangxi County finally arrived. They had traveled from a city where the temperature was below 0 to 1, where it was in the 50s, a 30-degree swing. They thought it would be warm enough to take off their coats. Their train ride had taken 29 hours. It was official business, so they had booked sleeper cars on the slower train, which was cheaper than taking the high-speed rail that would have required 3 transfers. Leo and his roommate's trip back with Sean had been a similar ordeal of trains, buses, and a 3-wheel truck. It had been an adventure, and luckily, Jordan and Alex had been good sports about it. The county officials had chosen the longer, but more relaxing train journey. They brought with them a commemorative banner, a certificate of appreciation, an official letter, and 20 pounds of wild mushrooms. Dressed in their best official attire, they hadn't felt out of place on the train. There were 3 of them, 2 older men and 1 younger one. But the moment they stepped off the train, they felt a jarring sense of disconnect. Economically, Kangxi County was probably a decade or 2 behind the rest of the country. It was a poor, remote place with harsh living conditions. But back home, as public officials, they held a certain status. Here, in a major city, it was different. The 2 older men had chosen to wear their formal, old-fashioned politician suits, the kind that looked sharp in county meetings but seemed stuffy and out of place here. They felt as if the laughing passers-by were mocking them. The younger official, in his jacket that was considered trendy back home, felt even more conspicuous. Their government-issued briefcases, emblazoned with Kangxi County, only made it worse. He was relieved he'd brought a backpack instead. They had checked the weather forecast, 45 degrees, and had packed away their heavy coats. But the damp, windy air that greeted them was colder than they expected. It was a different kind of cold than the dry chill back home. They shivered and sneezed, hastily pulling their coats back on. Thankfully, someone was there to meet them. Walt, one of the university's drivers, had been tasked with the pickup. The president herself had given the order, so he had arrived an hour early. He spent the time meticulously cleaning his Buick inside and out. The old train station had only one exit, so it was easy to spot them. He held up a sign and smoothly escorted them to the car. The university didn't have its own guest house, so they were put up in a Hilton Garden Inn in the town next to campus, a town that was more like a small city, complete with a McDonald's, a Starbucks, and a Hilton. The university had a partnership with a hotel for official guests. They were given 3 separate rooms. Lunch was arranged at the university cafeteria, with the president personally attending. While she hadn't met them at the station, she made a point to host their first meal. According to protocol, her rank was higher than theirs. Last night's dinner at the private kitchen had been on her own dime, but today's was an official reception meal, a high-quality catered lunchbox with 4 dishes, a soup, fruit, and dessert, with options for noodles or buns for those who didn't prefer rice. There was, of course, no alcohol on a workday. The officials had been worried that the big city administrators would be difficult to deal with, but President Grant was warm and direct. They also found the young female teacher who assisted her to be strikingly beautiful and professional. After lunch, they were immediately scheduled for their first meeting. There was no afternoon nap. It seemed the rhythm of the big city was different from their counties. Meanwhile, Leo, having survived a breakfast surrounded by 3 women and a dog, had escaped under the pretext of buying breakfast for his roommates. He couldn't handle it. Stella's cool smile, Jessica's gentle one, and Paige's goofy grin. It was too much. He didn't understand women. As she watched him flee faster than Moose, a smile played on Stella's lips. The dog looked after him, completely bewildered. What's the cub running from? 3 masters petting you at once is pure heaven. He was so comfortable he had closed his eyes in bliss. As usual, Leo headed to his quiet classroom to study. He had chosen it specifically because it was on a high floor in a remote building, and it was usually empty, save for 2 other regulars. But today, when Wendy Liu and Colin Edwards saw him walk in, they were buzzing with curiosity. As college students, they were always the first to know what was trending. The latest craze was a ridiculously bad TV show called Storm and Cloud, which everyone was hate-watching. Then, as an antidote, someone recommended The Chancellor's Gambit, promising it would heal the trauma inflicted by the other show. So everyone flocked to watch The Chancellor's Feast, as they nicknamed it. And it was true. Storm and Cloud had some nice visuals, but the plot was an absolute train wreck. The Chancellor's Feast, on the other hand, was perfect. The story, the cinematography, the costumes, the dialogue, even the music, it was all so well done that it felt like a healing balm. It left you feeling calm, happy, and peaceful, washing away the stress of the day. A good director can make you instantly connect with a character, whether you love them, hate them, or pity them. The character of Silas, the heroine's deceased white moonlight, had just been introduced, and he embodied everything good and warm. The audience's affection for him was off the charts. Penelope Hayes had crafted the perfect white moonlight, a character who became not just the heroine's, but everyone's. The screen seemed to glow with a warm, gentle light whenever he appeared. Even Colin, who was supposed to be studying for the GREs, had gotten sucked in by his roommates. And then he saw him, the master from his study room. He thought the guy's TikTok was impressive enough, but now he was acting in a hit TV show. When he had heard about it from a freshman at lunch, who was gushing about how handsome the actor was, she glanced at her phone and gasped. It was him. The super handsome guy was the master who always appeared in their study room. She had even brought him a date-flavored yogurt today. She wanted to ask him what show it was, but her social anxiety held her back. She picked up her phone to search for it, but she didn't have to. The trending topics told the whole story. Penelope Hayes' triumphant return. The Chancellor's Gambit is a mega hit. The Chancellor's Gambit smashes ratings record. Silas exploding. It was clearly a massive hit. She hadn't expected the master to show up today, but there he was, right on schedule, looking as calm as ever. Colin couldn't contain himself and rushed over. When he got up and followed. Dude, were you in a show? You're famous. Leo took off his headphones and glanced at the phone when he was holding out. He saw Penelope's name, the ratings, and his character, Silas, trending all on its own. Wow, he thought. They must have spent a fortune on marketing. He scanned it briefly and dismissed it. A trending topic was just a fleeting spike in traffic. It could be easily manipulated. He'd heard his professor and his wife talk about it. He figured Penelope had paid for the promotion. It would be silly for him to get caught up in the hype. It's all just marketing, he told him seriously. Don't pay too much attention to it. Then he prepared to start studying. The morning was his most productive time. He told them he had just been an extra for a few days to get an internship credit. Then he put his books out. His nonchalant attitude left Colin and Wendy feeling a little ashamed. The master was so unfazed by fame. What a role model. Congratulations, host. You have successfully charmed silver tier single male, Colin Edwards. Your efforts have been modestly effective. Affection has reached 76. Please continue your efforts and climb to new heights. Leo was surprised. He remembered Wendy's affection had already hit 80, but Colin's had been stuck at 70 until now. It seemed that, with a few exceptions, it was harder for men to gain affection from other men. Colin was thinking that if he were the one trending online, he'd be so conceited he wouldn't know which way was up. Yet here was this guy, putting his phone on silent and cracking open a textbook. Leo gave the same explanation when his family asked. It was just basic promotion. He had no idea that Penelope Hayes herself was so excited she could barely sit still. She hadn't spent that much on marketing. To get this many trending topics would cost a fortune. Her phone had been ringing off the hook all day. Success brings friends out of the woodwork. A dozen investors had called, offering to fund her next project, no strings attached, as long as it was the Chancellor's Gambit too. The first one had barely started airing, and they were already clamoring for a sequel. It was like seeing the first flash of imperial green in a raw jade stone. Everyone wanted a piece of it. Penelope spent the day fielding calls. Everyone wants to shower you with money when you don't need it. But when you're truly desperate, you can't get a dime.